So, due to massive popular demand of a single friend in Australia by the name of Jay, the recommendation is that I should do an intro in this form to each of these videos. I shall attempt to do this. If it gets a bit boring or I'm in a sour mood, I might just skip it. But this next video, Professor Ming Ming Chiu came in and we had a discussion about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa and how it could apply to the situation that's going on in Hong Kong. We sort of poked holes in it and we sort of learnt more about his structure, sort of seven-step plan that could be implemented in order to sort of like bring together the bipolar, well, the groups of the blue and the yellow within Hong Kong. We also went into other things like, for example, techniques of, I don't want to really spoil it, but basically, yeah, it was a very interesting conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and absolutely honored to have the professor on. Yeah. All systems are recording.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, 2, 1. Welcome. Thanks so much for coming in, Professor. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was chatting with a mutual friend of ours. I don't think we should name his name.
Okay.
The
one I met last week.
Oh, you met him last week, did you?
Yes.
Okay. And then, well, he was in the swimming pool. We live in the same area.
Oh, okay.
So we happened to meet now that the swimming pool has opened, and we like to have a good natter. And he was just busy telling me about a fellow that he met,
Mm-hmm.
and he knows that I'm South African, so he brought up the subject of this a Truth and Reconciliation
Mm-hmm.
movement back in South Africa, which happened in about 1996.
Mm-hmm.
I was about 16 years old at the time.
Uh-huh.
And I remember thinking, because having had this background in South Africa, it was the first thing that sort of came up to me, and I thought, bloody hell, I should definitely try reach out to you and see if I can get you to have an Indaba, and you accepted. I'm really thankful. So maybe you want to tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what's your story, kind of thing, and then we can sort of go into the whole truth and reconciliation thing and what it would mean to Hong Kong, etc.
So let me just connect to that. So I guess I was in my 20s at that time. I was really impressed at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And in fact, I was so impressed that at that time I was getting my PhD and I was applying for jobs. I actually bought Nelson Mandela's book, Long Walk to Freedom, on my interviews.
Did you? Wow.
So that was my prop. So I'm now a professor, a chair professor of analytics and diversity, and I do artificial intelligence and statistics, and I work with lots of different people. My expertise is actually in collaboration as well. So I think about it, I use it, and so...
In collaboration, you said?
Collaboration. So my expertise is how to work with other people. Group
okay.
policies, how to interact, what problems come up, how to fix them. So I applied that in my work. So I have like 108 co-authors at my last count.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked with a lot of people successfully. And so I also bring a particular skill. Artificial intelligence and statistics is something that most people don't have, very technical skills. I've got a lot of people who are like English majors or literature folks or writing folks. So that's a really useful combination. And so I think...
we can go into all of these things quite nicely, actually. I'd really like to go tap into all of these things. This is very interesting. So you're going to say?
Yeah, so going back to the beginning, I was born in Hong Kong.
Oh, yeah.
But I left when I was a year old. And so I basically grew up in the United States. I got my degrees at Columbia, Harvard, Berkeley.
Okay.
Then my postdoc at UCLA. And then I came to Hong Kong to work. And so I worked in Hong Kong for about 9 years. went back to U.S., went to Buffalo to work as a professor there, went to Purdue, and came back to Hong Kong. So of course, in these times, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is extremely relevant, right? There's a lot of discord in Hong Kong. Even family members are arguing with each other. So it's gotten so bad that I know some younger folk have moved out of their homes. Their parents threw them out because they didn't believe what they believed. So
maybe you want to sort of outline what's sort of happened, at least, because there is an international audience over here, and they might not what's the professor talking about? What do you mean? What's the whole need? I mean, for example, when I spoke to my mom and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm getting a professor and we're going to talk about the Truth and Reconciliation movement and how it could apply to Hong Kong." First reaction from my mom was like, "Don't you think that's a bit early?" I'm like, yeah. Like in South Africa, we had to go through a hell of a lot of crap.
Yes.
For us to sort of reach, the level where literally the Truth and Reconciliation movement seemed to be the only recourse that did not result in a bloody bloodbath.
Yes.
And as a 16-year-old, you're only starting to parse the world around you at that stage, not fully appreciating the ramifications of apartheid. As European parents, they moved into South Africa, so we didn't. I wasn't really brought up with that really intense racist side of things. We went to what they call Model C schools, where it was all the nationalities, boys and girls that were there. And I recall stories of this Truth and Reconciliation movement sort of moving around South Africa, and then wherever it went, there was great anticipation and tears. It was like touching the hearts of the whole of South Africa. When I hear you, I mean, there are only a few people on the level of Nelson Mandela and David Attenborough.
Yes.
Only very few people who can have that sort of gravitas. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So, yeah. But I think I segued into something. I interrupted you.
So the spark for the protests in Hong Kong starting in June.
Yeah.
And the spark for those protests was an extradition law. So a Hong Kong person had gone to Taiwan with his girlfriend, killed her. He came back to Hong Kong. And there's no extradition treaty between Taiwan and Hong Kong. Yeah. So they proposed one, quite naturally. But Hong Kong wanted to take advantage of it and say, okay, we could use this for not only Taiwan, but also mainland China.
Okay.
So extraditing people to Taiwan, people think it's no big deal. But China is a completely different story.
Why?
Different rules of law. Okay. Hong Kong, pretty much people trust the judicial system. And they don't trust the judicial system in China, in part because Hong Kong is rule of law, where you follow the law, or you're supposed to. Whereas China is rule by law. So government officials use the law to impose their rule. So that's a totally different system, different view of the world. And so people in Hong Kong are very worried about that. So it's not only people who might commit crimes, but also legal contracts, right? So if you're a company, the contract's based in Hong Kong, you follow Hong Kong rules, Hong Kong judges make these decisions, and there's much more trust in Hong Kong law. If you make a contract in China, people are very concerned that powerful people will use their connections to manipulate judges or lawyers or prosecutors to bring cases against you. So there's a lot more trust of Hong Kong law than mainland China law. So that's why.
But is this a common case that happens in China, that these sorts of things happen?
This is actually policy. So Xi Jinping, when he gives a speech, he talks about rule by law.
Oh, right.
So it's very overt.
Okay.
It's not like a hidden thing. Everyone knows it.
Oh, okay.
And the government's very proud of it. They think of it okay, this is a smart use of government. You use the law to enforce your rule.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So everyone agrees to it. It's not contested. Everyone agrees this is true.
Okay.
And so they're proud of it. This is the thing you should do. So from Xi Jinping's point of view, the fact that they're using law is a smart thing. And the fact that other countries aren't doing it just means they're not using
They don't understand. They don't understand what the real purpose of a law is. Is that right?
Exactly. So,
amateurs.
I think that's really how he thinks.
I see.
So anyway, Hong Kong people are very concerned about expanding this law to China. Okay. So the protests were about that. It's fine to have extradition in Taiwan, but let's not extend it to China.
Okay.
And so they proposed a law, actually started in April, and then it usually takes months to go through.
Mm.
But then, like when it seemed like it was starting to move forward, then I think it was June 8th, there were like massive protests, or June 7th, something like that.
Yeah.
The first week of June. And I think like 500,000 people came out, or some large number.
I think it was
maybe
more like 2 million. More.
Yeah.
Or was it? There was a number. It was like like a good quarter or more than that of the population of Hong Kong hit the streets.
Yeah. So I think like the lower boundary was 500,000, and then like the upper boundary was 1 million, and then the 2 million was later.
Oh right. Okay.
Yeah. So then like this happened in the past in 2003. There's like a anti-treason law, and so 500,000 people came out, and the chief executive backed down. So
yeah.
I thought that's for sure what's going to happen. The always people come out, they back down, things go back to normal, nothing interesting happens anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
But instead, they decide to take an approach. They decide to take a different approach. They're just like, hey, let's just rush it through. So let's do it on Wednesday, because it was on Sunday. Hong Kong people protest on Sundays because it's your day off, doesn't interrupt your work. But on Wednesday, people are probably going to work, not going to pay as much attention. Yeah. Right? But then, like, they didn't really understand Hong Kong people.
No, obviously not.
So, like, Wednesday, they tried to push it through, but I think by like 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, they're like, the report said there's like 40,000 people in the streets.
Okay.
And then then it grew through the afternoon. So then by 9 o'clock, when the session was supposed to be held, there's like tons of people outside. They're yelling. They have blockaded off the building. So legislators weren't able to get through. And it's like, hey, let's not do this. Let's postpone it until like later on. Okay. So at first it was postponed until the afternoon. But, protests hung around. The crowds get larger. So you can't get in the morning. You get in the afternoon. So then they said, okay, let's postpone until like the following day. But then, by the evening, by the afternoon, I think like 3 o'clock, there's so many people out there that it's starting to get a little like boisterous. And so the police started using tear gas.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And, so in China, those sort of tactics would, make people afraid. And then they would back down.
That's
so
not going to happen with Hong Kong
in
people,
Hong Kong,
I'm
people
afraid.
Get angry. People get angry. Yeah. So the following Sunday, so they postponed it several days. And then on Sunday, that's when 2 million people came out. Right. Right. So you had a lot more people come out. And then at that time, you think, okay, this seems like a lot of people. This is like, 28% of people in Hong Kong. You think they backed out, but no, they're going to keep on pushing it. So they delayed it, but they didn't back down. So then, amazingly, so both sides went back down. And then because of the history of the protest movement, there isn't a particular protest leader. So in 2014, there were protests about education, curriculum, many other things as well. But then at that time, Carrie Lam, who's current chief executive, essentially governor of Hong Kong, she actually negotiated with the protest leaders back in 2014. And the result of the negotiation was they arrested the leaders. So this time around,
people smartened up.
We're not going to get arrested. We're not going to be leaders. So there's no leader in this movement.
Okay.
And so this is actually quite difficult for most people to understand, especially if you're leader of a country. How could you have a movement that doesn't have a leader? And so this is where, you think about how could this happen? It wouldn't be chaos, wouldn't be disorganized. And this is where social media comes into play. So let me take the example of video games. So there are a lot of people, young kids, who play multiplayer video games online. And this seems totally chaotic as well. So you can have thousands of people playing a game. These people often don't know each other. So let's say you and I want to join. We sign on to our computers, and then we get on, and the computer signs us to a team of 5 people. And then we're going to be competing against 5 other people, let's say an adventure or some business or something whatever the online game is. And it takes time to load up the computer. And during that time, let's say 1 minute, we have 1 minute to decide how we're going to run our adventure. And so basically people get used to saying, well, I'm good at defense, I can provide materials, I'm good at logistics. Right. And people just self-assign what they're good at, and then people agree very quickly, and then you go off on your adventure. And then during the adventure, you're really way too busy. You don't have time to discuss anything in detail. You might say, oh, there's a monster coming, run. Or I need supplies, help. And so you do that, and then the game's over. And then usually you analyze what happened during the game. You talk about what went well, what went poorly. Right. You debrief, and next time you know how to do better. Well, this is pretty much what happens during the demonstrations.
As a simple example of that, I had a friend that came over from Israel at the time, and I thought it might be interesting for him to have a look at one of these protests. And I thought this is a bit of a historic moment within Hong Kong. So we joined the march, we joined the walk. I think it was a legal one, that one. I don't know. But and it was quite interesting. Like at one point somebody made an alert or something, and there was a group of people that started to shout and to start running. And then you could hear like everybody was like, no, don't go slowly. Then immediately everyone started chanting like 1, 2, 1, 2, or was it left, right, left, right? And that's an example of an improvement, in the sense that what would happen is you'd have a stampede effect, a sort of like, mosh pit of people. But if everybody starts to advance at a rhythm, then you're going to avoid that sort of that sort of bottleneck, that kettling sort of thing going on. I was like, wow, this is a very organized thing, even in the heat of the moment, when like tear gas and all sorts of strange unknown things are happening beyond the horizon of people's heads, people are still able to sort of keep things under control.
Yes.
Wow.
And so I think playing these video games helps with that, because that's what you do in a video game. You have time for short commands like 1, 2, slow or medium pace, and then everyone spreads the message, right? So it's not like one person tells everyone to do.
Yeah, that's right. The hand signals,
wasn't
there?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So there's signals, and then people like just pass it on. Like they yell, and then like people around them, and they just pass on message. You have waves of messages going through crowds.
Yeah.
And so, so basically, you kind of think like this, kind of like a video game. You're playing this. You have very similar situations, very chaotic, but like there's order within that chaos. And so you communicate within your immediate people, your neighbors. They pass it along, and then just like in a video game, like the protest ends, but then you play again next week, and in that week in between, people talk on social forums, like what went well, what didn't go well, what should we change. And so it's not only you play the game once, you play it and you play it again, but between games you learn. And not only do you learn, but you're talking through an entire forum, so the entire community sees it. It's pretty much transparent. Like anyone can just go on and find what's going on. Yeah. And so that lesson is not only just for me personally, but for everyone. And so you can agree, okay, we're going to use certain messages, certain hand signals, and then so next week, you massively improve like 100%, because things, lots of people doing different things, and because you don't have a leader, you don't have that coordination, which is a downside. But then you have lots of people trying things out, and some things work, some things don't. The things that work, you keep on doing. The things that didn't work, you should stop doing. So the key to it is it's a learning organization. Every single week, you learn more, different tactics, and you try different things. So sometimes having no leader is really bad. So people can go off and do stupid things. So I think like one terrible example of this is at the airport, there's a protest, there's a reporter from mainland China, and then some protesters just beat him up.
Oh, yeah.
And that was like really horrendous. They made it to social media. That, I think, led to the largest protests against the social protest movement, like the more pro-Beijing side. So when you don't have a leader, you can have breakdown discipline, people do stupid things. Yeah. But the positive side of it is that because people are trying different things, it's much more creative. You're not waiting for a leader to do things. Everyone just tries things. And then also, because you have decentralized control, one of the major innovations of the Hong Kong protests is that multi-site protests. Instead of protests in one place, people actually protest in 20 different places. And so that's definitely, that you're going to have less discipline for sure, and people are going to make more mistakes. But it places a lot more stress on your opposition, because you probably can have your best people in one place, both like leaders of protests and then also police, for instance. But when you have 20 protests, you're going to have like your 20th best person, if you're lucky, at one of those places. They're much more likely to make mistakes than your best leader. Right. And what really counts in these things is like who makes the worst mistake. I mean, essentially the philosophy of the protest movement is you're trying to get the opposition, the government, to make a really bad mistake that goes on TV or media, and then that really gains support for your movement. So if you have like a really disciplined government, they don't make mistakes, protest movement is not going to succeed, because the government's just way more powerful. Sure. So you have to rely on people to make mistakes. And then when you put pressure on like 20 different protest sites, you get much more likely someone's going to make a mistake.
Of course, yeah. Because in the leaders of the opposition in one of those, like, 20 area 20 would be a lot less, organized and disciplined, and more prone to To fuck up, really.
Yes, exactly right. And so when you have like a top-down leadership, you can't break that far away. But if you're in a leaders movement, the 20th best place, they're much closer to the top people at the top site. And discussion on social media means everyone's sort of picking up that sort of information. So you always have like individuals that may break off, but you're probably much better off in the 20th best place than a hierarchical organization.
Yeah, but when you're putting a stress on the system like to that degree, that's when things can snap. And you say like you're pushing your opposition to make a mistake. Mistakes can happen in the form of like like a leader of the opposition in Area 20 resorts to some severe violence.
Yes.
Or in the case of like that MTR incident where some kids were smacked up a bit.
Yes.
So yeah, but I mean like some of the examples of good not good things or usable things, and you keep amplifying that is the case of the map. There were maps and groups that were created, and I downloaded this thing and I tried to understand what was going on, and I all of those symbols seemed to be sort of like code for something else, and only if you were part of the group, and then you could understand what it was, and I thought it was from a sociological, or from studying a human point of view, I thought it was fascinating how things sort of unfolded. And through the use of technology too. Absolutely fascinating. Yeah. And actually that incident that you mentioned in the airport, I literally got onto the flight getting ready to fly back from Vietnam to Hong Kong.
Oh.
When we all boarded the flight, all buckled up, all ready to take off. And then the captain said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to disembark. We cannot fly back to Hong Kong. And I was like, oh, God damn it. Yes. And yeah, I know what you mean, but that was the first sort of like incident where people were like, oh, Jesus. Actually, it's getting a little bit annoying now.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so I think this is also one of the major innovations of the protest movement, which is because they let everyone do kind of their own thing, there's essentially an agreement that people would try different tactics. So you have people who were quite violent. They would like throw firebombs, Molotov cocktails at the police. At the other extreme, you had people who like made posters.
Yeah, right.
Really innocent.
Like the piggy. There's a piggy thing and all sorts of things. I don't know.
So you actually create this incredibly creative art movement.
Yeah.
Where they posted like on all these walls everywhere, the democracy walls. So you had like all sorts of people. And I think that was one of the major innovations that where if you want to participate, you can participate. You can do whatever you want. Just like whatever you want to do, you're part of the movement now. If you say you're part of the movement, you're part of the movement. You make a little poster, you're part of the movement. And so the tactics are something that's really, I think the protest, you could argue, is not very successful. They kind of stopped the law, but there's still a lot of unrest. But certainly the tactics have moved all around the world. So
certainly so.
So like, there are YouTube videos of all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so in Chile, in Lebanon, in France, you see like people are like using the same materials, same tactics.
Yeah. And now in Thailand, right?
Yes.
It's quite fascinating, especially those umbrellas, like
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
It's quite an interesting little flow that's going on there.
Yeah, so it's kind of ironic that Hong Kong's known as a center of technology.
Yeah.
But I think because people understand technology so well, they know that China and the Hong Kong government have a lot of technology disposal. So they're intentionally using low-tech materials, things that everyone has. So you don't want a movement where only few people have access to technology. You want a movement where basically everyone has access to it. So an umbrella, costs a few dollars,
right.
Or tens of dollars. Everyone can have an umbrella. Water bottles, right? Yeah. That's like a really useful tool. Yeah. So and you have those.
Like extinguishing the tear gas canisters, right? Before people would be like, oh God, and run away. But now like, no, Hong Kong, as we get in there, like
Yes. And then
extinguish it.
The particular materials, like the type of gloves you should use, the mask you should have.
Right.
So like all of that, like that level of creativity, and that's just for the protesters. And like it's expanded so many different domains. So from September 27th to September 30th of 2019, Hong Kong people were able to organize protests in 68 different cities around the world, supporting Hong Kong anti-extradition law. And so wow, like Hong Kong's only 7 million people. How do you get people in 68 cities?
No, I know Hong Kongers can do that because Hong Kongers are some of the most well-connected people, and like,
Yes.
I know, they got enough money, travel around, they bought probably apartments everywhere, well-connected people,
Yes.
well-connected people.
Yes. So I think even Hong Kongers are surprised when I tell them there are 1.7 million Hong Kong people who live outside Hong Kong. And so these are people all around the world. And so they raised money. They asked for $2 million to buy newspaper ads in all these different cities. And this is another thing. Hong Kong people are wealthy. I think the average Hong Kong person has about 1.4 million Hong Kong dollars in assets. And so that's a lot of money. And so when 1.7 people Hong Kong outside, they have friends, connections, they're asking for money, they raise them a lot of money very quickly. So GoFundMe, the standard like online raising platform now, I think in less than 2 hours, they hit their goal of like 1 million. And then in 24 hours, they had 2 million. And it's like, stop giving money. We don't know how to spend it anymore. But we have plenty of ads now. Stop giving us money. And so like in 24 hours, they raised like $2 million to place ads in all these different cities. So at the time, they had protests all around the world. And then of course we have all these protests outside. They raise the profile. They're reporters who are covering these protests. And so newspapers all around the world, and it gets their leadership, of course, right? So leaders talk about, if they're pro-democracy, they like to talk about Hong Kong. And so it's really a huge movement. And this is why even the protests, really, at that time, no one had died, right? There are many other protests around the world.
Right.
The Uyghurs, for instance, in Western China, much more serious, much more severe. But they don't get as much attention because they don't have the resources, they don't have the diaspora, they don't have technical skills, they don't have the information skills.
The Uyghurs. I had Patrick Poon on a while back, and he worked for Amnesty International, and he was speaking about the situation that goes on with the Uyghurs and whatnot. And with some, I've been reading books like, The Rape of Nanking and, Ordinary Men and, these kinds of things. So like, I think my tolerance level has sort of increased like up to that level, right? So where I'm like, where's the raping, killing and murdering kind of thing, but I'm glad it hasn't reached that level. And I really don't want it ever to reach that level.
Yes.
So now maybe we can also go into sort of like the intentions, the motivations, like how captured is the Hong Kong state, the city at the moment? I mean, it feels like communism is not even communism. A dictator, Xi Jinping, has put down roots here quite strongly. In my opinion, it's the free markets that really bring prosperity to a place. Not so much the like democracy is, or even whatever sort of like a political system. If whatever political system can support a free market, and the more free the better, because essentially free markets weed out the failures much quicker and allocate capital to more successful individuals. Now, this is free markets. We've very rarely seen a free market until I believe the cryptocurrency markets have come along. In the sense because one could argue that the exchanges have an influence on the price, but like the typical exchanges, I think they're pretty heavily regulated and whatnot. There's a barrier to entry. So now Shanghai, about 10, 20 years ago, I think it had more free markets under Deng Xiaoping and his the person after him. But now it feels like even Shanghai it's like, it was maybe 60-50%, now it's like 30% free market. And I think this is going to go the same way for Hong Kong. What's your opinion on the impact of what's going to happen now that we have this rather communist dictator mentality, and what it's going to have an effect on free markets? Or even if you feel like free markets have such a, if it does have an impact or not. What's your opinion on these sorts of things?
I think it's important to understand Xi Jinping actually favors a market system. So his view of markets is kind of his view of law.
Okay.
Like, markets are there, but you should use them.
Uh-huh.
Just like you use law to impose your power, you should use markets to impose your power. And so you need to have markets because also they're efficient. So he believes in efficiency of markets. This is why he welcomes major corporate leaders into the fold, into the Communist Party. So like Tencent, Alibaba, all of those people are part of the Communist Party. And he works with them very extensively. So it's kind of like capitalism, it's kind of like free markets, but not quite. Just like, there's rule by law, it's kind of like rule of law, but not quite. And so his idea is that, okay, we have these corporations. They're pretty efficient at like doing things. Let's use them. Let's put government officials inside these corporations. And as long as they're making money, that's good. They're going to like buy technology, that's good. Let's use these companies for our benefit. So let's say like we need to have like a fast computer to run our jet planes. Well, we could try and make it ourselves, but it's a lot less costly just to buy it. And so like the United States is not going to sell it to the Chinese government, but they'll sell it to other companies. Well, we can have Chinese companies buy it from other intermediaries from the U.S. government, which is pretty tough because the U.S. actually controls the technology world. But there are places like Israel. The U.S. sells tons of stuff to Israel. Israel essentially has no technology controls. I mean, technically, they created a committee last fall in 2019. The committee hasn't met yet. They're not covering technology. They're covering like food and like clothing, but they're not covering technology. Israel essentially doesn't have technology control. So Chinese companies, they move into Israel. They go to Jerusalem. They set up shop there. They trade with other companies. Israel gets technology from the United States, and you get dual-use technology. So military technology is very obvious, but you also have computers that's really fast. And you can use them for multiple purposes. You can use them to play video games. You can use them to model missile flights. So you take dual-use technology, have a Chinese company, you give money to this company, they buy from Israeli company, and there's just companies buying stuff from each other. The government is just far removed. When the computers get to China, they just like transfer them to the government. So Xi Jinping is very thoughtful about how to use corporations. So he's not going to bring China back to a communist system. He actually favors the capitalist system because he sees its efficiency.
No, I want to sort of look at it from a different light. I think there's something that you might be missing, and that to Xi Jinping, loyalty is more important. All of these companies that are participating in this Chinese version of a market, free market, so-called, loyalty is more important than anything. So and these companies will fundamentally only be able to buy. They will not be able to produce themselves, because in order to produce yourself, you need to have the scientific method. And the scientific method means that you are going to research nature, not at the beck and whim of loyalty to a party. Do you see what I mean? It's like you have to disregard everything and let the data speak to you. And if the natural laws say otherwise, what the party line says, you will follow what the nature says. Do you see what I mean? So only that way can you actually push science and actually start to produce cutting-edge science yourself. Otherwise, you'll always be at the beck and whim of technology producers. Now, this group of people that you're referring to, we have a terminology. We call them the tech furnace. So the tech furnace is equivalent to the farmers of Mao Zedong. The way they had to melt down their hose and whatnot because there was a diktat from the government saying we need metal. Okay, so you farmer, melt down your hose, or else you die. So they don't have a choice. They will do that. So as a result, what's happening is that these tech furnace companies like Huawei and all of these, the circle of embedded into Israel and whatnot, they don't understand this technology. For them, it's loyalty first, and as a result, they take meat and essentially throw it at this technology to try to understand it, and it doesn't work because you've got the wrong mindset. You've got the loyalty first versus the ambition to understand nature's laws, and you can't. Do you see what I mean?
That's a good description of like Mao Zedong China. That's not the good description of current China.
Okay.
So Xi Jinping has a much lighter touch.
Okay.
He doesn't impose rules on companies willy-nilly. Basically, companies mostly run their own business.
Yeah.
It's only when he needs something from them that he takes it. So, like, let's say 10 cents. I imagine 99% of the time, they're just making their own decisions. They're making business decisions, they're very successful, and they're building their own technologies. Xi Jinping only comes along once in a while where, I need that computer, buy that for me. And so it's not even like a hard thing to ask often. Or there's a technology we need. I need you to share technology with us. We're not going to seize your technology. We just need someone to explain how to do it. We're going to buy a few of your machines, and then we're going to incorporate into our military. So it's not a heavy touch. It's a very light touch because Xi Jinping recognized the importance of having companies become efficient. And they don't become efficient by the government telling them to do. They become efficient by figuring out on their own, competing in the marketplace, and then getting better at it and making profits. So he also sees the profit as very important. Like, it's not only the government wants things. If the company is efficient and successful and profitable, then they'll make money and won't cost the government so much. So this is a much lighter touch where they're still in control. Xi Jinping demands your obedience. There's no question about that. That's totally correct.
Right.
But it doesn't need your obedience on 99% of what you do. Only when it really matters to him, or the government or military, then he's going to ask you to do something. But most of the time, you're doing your own thing, you're making money, you're expanding to other markets, that's fine. It's only when he needs you. So many of these companies have one person inside that company. They might sit in board meetings. Most of the time, they just listen. They don't do very much. It's when something that seems important, they might alert the government, they might bring up stuff, but most of the time, they're not going to bother them because they're not going to try to interfere with something that's successful. They're paying taxes, they're collecting money. Xi Jinping actually wants these countries successful abroad. So this is actually kind of failure of Chinese companies, not because the government's controlling them, but because it's really hard for Chinese companies to move outside their culture. Like, Chinese culture is very specific. If you go from Chinese culture even to Israeli culture, it's really hard. You try to figure you have this like freedoms,
Definitely.
like freedom of press. It's like way different world, and they're trying to adapt. So if you look at all the amazing Chinese products, which are really effective in China, pretty much TikTok is the only one that's really gone abroad successfully. And TikTok really had intentionally outside perspective. They're going to let people develop outside. They have computer programs, they have marketers. They go to other countries, figure out what's working there. And they've really developed outside China. So they have Chinese branch, but they branch has separate outside branch where they figure things out, things don't work, they fix it. And so they have a really different mindset, and they're adapting to a culture, learning as they go along. This is the key to success for TikTok. This is why other companies like Alibaba and Tencent have not made it outside China, because they really grew up in China, but they haven't really learned to live outside China.
Right.
So I think like the free market is not going to be an issue for Xi Jinping. There's a separate problem in free market, which is why you can't just simply have free markets. Because if you only have a free market, what happens is people are very successful, they accumulate lots of money and profits, and they get larger and larger and larger. At some point, they realize, hey, we're really big. We can influence government rules and policies to help us. So if you become really powerful,
The lobbying.
you basically buy politicians. I mean, if we use nice words, we call it lobbying. But essentially, they're buying stuff, right? They're buying laws, they're buying regulations.
Yeah.
And so they take this money, you transfer millions or tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. People will do a lot of things for that amazing amount of money. And so when you're rich and powerful enough, you tend to do that. So in any capitalist system where you have free markets, there's always a danger. Even like Harding, the U.S. president, like he was really pro-capitalist. And
Who? Sorry.
Harding, he's the U.S. president. He presided over the Great Depression.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He's like probably one of the smartest presidents the United States ever had. And even he realized that the danger of capitalism are capitalists. If you have unfettered capitalism, people concentrate power, and it's very tempting for them to use that power to affect the political system. And when that happens, your political system becomes beholden to the powerful economic leaders. So you can't really have unfettered capitalism. Once you have that, then the people really powerful, they're going to close off markets to competitors and use laws against them. So if you look at like the history of the world, when you have concentration of power, it's very rare for them. Actually, they almost always enter the political sphere.
Yeah.
So if you want to have free markets, you need to have a balanced political system that
Yeah.
prevents capitalists from being too powerful. This is why you need rule of law,
Yeah.
so they don't change laws to their favor.
No,
And you
I
also
agree.
need you need a governing system which prevents powerful people from dominating the government.
Well,
Which is why this is why, to finish thought, this is why
Oh.
free markets and democracies often go together, because
mm,
the free markets allow you to grow, you make a lot more and the economy grows. The democracy prevents the capitalists from becoming too powerful, because you have like the people voting into office, people who are going to push back against people who are concentrating power in that way. So this is why it's important to have that balance. If you just have free markets, you can have concentrated power. If you only have democracies without a free market, you have communism. People are very inefficient when you have such groupthink and group decision
Okay.
making. So that's why around the world you have both free markets and democracies.
so whereas in China, there is a deliberate intention to accumulate power with the party,
Yes.
and so leveraging free markets in order to do that and to
Exactly.
keep that going.
Yes.
So yeah, that's quite an interesting play.
Like
That's a
ruling by markets,
Yeah.
ruling by law.
That's a very interesting observation. Very interesting observation indeed.
And so you see the
Yeah.
concentration of economic power. Xi Jinping has concentrated political power.
Right.
I mean, pretty much, he's really leading China. There's no doubt about it. What he wants is pretty much going to go. It's really hard to push back against him.
Yeah.
And so you see a concentration of political power. There's also concentration of economic power. And the great danger when you have concentration of power is that people are not going to tell you you're wrong.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of people brown-nosing you,
Exactly.
and this is where you as the earlier example, what you mentioned about how disparate groups of protesters are able to adapt and find a way, weaknesses in the system, separate, like a pack of wolves would separate maybe elk.
Yes.
And then weed out the weak ones, and then you
Yes.
can actually sort of like go into it. So something similar could happen even within the party,
Yes.
because if you've mandated yourself as leader for life, that means people are not moving up, and when people are not
Yes.
moving up, people reach for their daggers.
Yes.
So it becomes more difficult for somebody like Xi Jinping. And then once you've mobilized this massive behemoth of power, the person that's going to put the dagger in your back is going to wield this behemoth in the same way that they wield that dagger.
Yes.
And then the whole system can
Yes,
unravel.
when you create so much concentration of power, there are more people who want it.
Yeah.
So the United States, the U.S. president, is the most powerful person in the world, but it's still a relatively weak system. Like there are
Yeah.
lots of controls, there are all these people around him. You can see Trump, he wants to be like a dictator, but it's hard for him. He can't. There are too many other power sources around him, and,
Yeah.
the systems and institutions make it hard. If you actually have that much power, where you really are pretty much like dictator, it becomes a lot more attractive. There are a lot of people who don't want to become U.S. president, even though they're very rich and powerful.
sure.
Because it's a pain, it's a headache.
It's a pain in the ass. Can you imagine all those people?
Yeah.
Jesus
But
Christ.
if you're emperor,
Ah,
that
it's
seems
different.
much more attractive. So if you
Just cut off his head. God damn it.
yeah, if you create an emperorship, then a lot of people want it. A lot of people are going to compete with you for it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a system where it's a relatively weak leader, people don't want to be leader. They'll let you have it. It's fine. You can just do it. But if you create such a powerful position, more people want it,
Yeah.
and you essentially create more enemies, right? You're the person on top. People want to take over your position.
Yeah.
And then also, when people around you, exactly what you said, people are just going to say yes to you all the time. So there's a great danger you make a mistake and no one will tell you.
Yeah.
And now the world is so connected. One mistake can cause like billions or trillions of dollars of losses.
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's a great danger. When you concentrate power, you make a mistake and no one will tell you. And the U.S. president, everyone's telling him what to do, right? If he's making a mistake, there are tons of people telling them you're making a mistake. Not only the people around him, you have the legislature, judicial system, the media, people just talking, right? So there's like a lot of people criticizing you.
You got Antifa who's standing
Yes.
outside the White House wearing their black masks.
Everyone, yes.
Jesus
So
Christ.
that's like the opposite what's happening
Of course,
in
yeah.
China, right?
Yeah.
No one's going to tell Xi Jinping he's wrong. And that's the
Right.
great vulnerability.
Oh, interesting. So a while back we learned that separation of state and religion is a good thing.
Hmm.
And it's only recent that, and using this example, monetary systems have always sort of evolved from the people. Monetary systems originally were not of governments. It was from the people. We started bartering. We would use what they call commodity. I think it's called commodity money.
Yes.
Like, for example, yak shit or seashells,
Yep.
or tobacco, or beaver hides, for
Yes.
example. It would be a currency, and then people would naturally sort of do value exchanges from him. And then they discovered, oh, you know what? Actually, we can make more effective forms of transactions and trade by minting coin,
Yes.
gold coin. But then inevitably over time, what would happen? Yeah, exactly. So they would start to like dilute it out, or else nick bits of silver or gold off the coin.
Yep.
That was a form of tax, actually.
Yes.
You would get your coin would get nicked. So, and then it was during this time that where money became of the government or by the government for the people. And now we've reached a certain and round about that time, I'm going to use this example of thermodynamics. One could say that money at that stage was like solid state. So that means it's got a very low energy. It's difficult to move around.
Yes.
You know, it's like. And then later on, as soon as coins come about and whatnot, we're starting to enter the liquid state. So it takes more energy. So it's an endothermic reaction. It pulls energy from the environment, and now we've got more liquid sort of currency, until we reach like Wall Street time, and now we're starting to reach like gas stage, where money can be transmitted around the world at lightning speeds. But it's still, that money is still of the government, or in the case of America, it's a private organization, the FED. But now we've reached this new transition phase where, just like religion has a separation between religion and state, we can now have separation of money and government in the form of something like, for example, Bitcoin.
Yep.
Because now Bitcoin is something that's completely separate from governments. We are now entering a gaseous state where, just like a camp stove, when you're making a camp stove and you set it on fire and the gas is coming out, you can see that there's condensation that's happening on the gas stove because it's an endothermic reaction.
Yes.
It's pulling in energy.
Yep.
And that's what's going to be happening with Bitcoin now. We're going to see like massive intake of energy from the markets, from all different sorts of government systems into this system, allowing for separation of government and money. Now we're starting to see Hong Kong, they want to start pass laws about cryptocurrency things going on here. It seems like, and China has got their act together a lot faster than what America's doing, as well as the IMF.
Yep.
And they want to roll out this digital currency electronic payment, DCEP, as fast as possible.
Yes.
Do you think that these laws that are coming into place here in Hong Kong now are as a way of creating this barrier so that, this DCEP thing can roll out into this, Belt and Road initiative? What's your take on this whole little bit domain thing? I'm sure you're aware of what's going on.
So right now, currency is based on trust.
Yeah.
In the old days, like, it was based on gold. So you had to have, you might give like a dollar bill, but then like you could trade a dollar bill for gold. That was like a promise, the government promised it's good. And then basically because of economic reasons, it's more efficient to not have a gold backing. You could expand your currency. The more that your currency moves around, the better your economy, essentially. That's a short version of it. It's more sophisticated than that. That's basic story. So once you have that, then you don't rely on the gold standard. And then you trust the government to be stable and not to collapse.
Yeah.
So now we have trust in government. And then when we go to cryptocurrency, it's trust in the mechanism, right? So you don't trust the government, you trust that the computer algorithm is stable and you can't hack into it. So it's still a matter of trust. It's just a trusting of different thing. So do you trust the computer algorithm? Do you trust the government? And so it depends on the situation. So in Venezuela, they actually trust the government less than cryptocurrency because the government's such a mess, it might fall in a moment, who knows what's going on. So the algorithm, it's more likely that it's stable and they put their money there. But people have also broken into certain currencies. right? People, hackers, you have insecure systems, people break in, that's quite vulnerable. So a lot of people, unless you're Venezuela, most people really trust government-backed currencies compared to cryptocurrencies. So at least that's the state of play for now. So I think like the laws are useful to prepare for that future, but right now there isn't enough trust in the cryptocurrencies for them to be widespread, I think.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure. The latest quantitative easing round that happened in America because of the COVID situation, they've inflated the monetary supply massively.
Yes.
Typical Keynesian sort of mentality of, flood money into the system to sort of like buffer for a shock or something like that.
Yes.
But in the long run, everyone's wealth is just being watered down, inflation in that sense. But if you inflate everybody at the same time, I suppose that's okay. But it's for the first time that I know of that we actually have a little lifeboat where we can say, yes, just like I can vote in, I can say, okay, I'll participate in your company round where you're going to inflate the stocks or not. I can choose not to. I can actually withdraw or sell my equity. In this situation, if the government does that, I have a little life raft to say, no, I don't want to participate in your round of quantitative easing, your inflation round. Anyway, yeah.
So let me just address that point. So the reason they did quantitative easing is because there's a danger that people can't get the money they need. So you can have a company, let's say they sell donuts.
Yeah.
And they need to borrow money to get the dough to make the donuts, and they sell it, they can make money.
Yeah.
If they can, so often they're month to month, they might need to buy things on credit. So a lot of times they buy things on credit, they make the donuts, they sell it, then they take the profits and repay the people they bought the dough from. So if you think the economy is getting worse, people are less likely to lend money or give people credit. And so let's say the dough vendor decides this looks kind of tricky, I'm not sure he's going to pay me back. Then they might not sell as much.
Yeah.
The donut shop doesn't make as much donuts, there's enough to sell, they make less money. So if you don't have enough money flowing around, you could have a credit crunch where there's not enough credit. And so quantitative easing, at least for Jerome Powell in the United States, before coronavirus really hit in the United States, that was the problem. He's afraid there's a credit crunch. Let's throw money in the system. There won't be a problem. People won't have the credit. So the quantitative easing is to address a specific problem. And so it's to have money flow more. When you have money flow more, if it's being used well, people take the money, make things, and sell to other people and make more money. So the danger of inflation is not that people's money is worth less. The real danger is that people expand too quickly. If it's very easy to borrow money, you might borrow money and spend on things that actually people don't want. So I'm making donuts now. Let's say I'm selling to 2,000 people. If I can borrow more money at pretty low interest rates, I'm thinking hey, maybe I could sell 20,000 donuts. So I buy the dough, I buy the equipment, and I actually can't sell that much because people don't want that much. Then it gets wasted. So as long as people are using money, to make profits, it's actually fine for money to flow even infinitely. But at some point, you get to a stage where you're buying too much stuff that people don't need, and you're wasting the resources. So the danger of quantitative easing is not that your things are worth less. The danger is that you waste the money on things that people don't need and don't want.
So you're not really a proponent of a deflationary currency then?
Deflation is generally, I think most economists will tell you, deflation is a bad idea. Because basically right now, people are they have the businesses, they're making their donuts.
Yeah.
If you reduce the credit, you can shrink everyone, let's say by 2%. Well, then that donut maker makes 2% less donuts. He's making less money. So then your whole economy shrinks. So in general, no one really wants deflation. You don't want to have massive hyperinflation where things are going way out of bounds, people are doing crazy things, but you don't want deflation either. So this is why most people around the world agree that you should somewhere between 1% and 5%. There's general agreement on 2%.
Yeah.
That's kind of an arbitrary number. You could go as low as 1%, as high as 5%, but probably some low percentage of increasing inflation is good for everyone. So you're constantly increasing a little bit, but not too much. Not so people go crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so right now in the United States, because they can't have a good fiscal package where they take the money and give it to people so they can buy food, because that option wasn't available at the time, it's let's do quantitative easing first. so we reduce credit crunch. But like if you have both problems, then it's really severe because then you have like the money just freezes, and you don't want that to happen.
Yeah, but I mean, like, who's to say, like, the systems are not in place to go directly from the FED to the normal person on the streets. It's not there. It normally goes through the banking system, and then where it gets fractionalized, whatever the word is. But and then it would go into the system. But there's no. So this is the reason why these governments are looking at this and thinking, well, this is interesting. So if now the Fed is looking at systems like cryptocurrencies, and they're like, you know what? I could have a Fed coin on everybody's mobile phone in the country, and I don't need Jamie Dimon and commercial banks. Why don't I do that? So now you've got the equivalent of like IMF and the FED, who are looking at this and thinking, well, I could create this. And then you've got Jamie Dimon, who won a few years ago, like, poo-poos towards Bitcoin, but now wants to make a JP Diamond coin. So he's thinking, well, I can actually create a commercial bank, and I don't need the Fed kind of money, right? Mm-hmm. And now and then you've got the fintech side, which is the banks are, their hands are tied with regulations up the wazoo.
Yep.
But fintech, they're sort of eating at the commercial banks. And now that the FED have got this access to this, what's it like a central bank digital currency, like a CBDC, mm-hmm. They would also start chewing at the commercial banks. So the commercial banks are going to be, the carcass of a whale mm-hmm. in the ocean that's mm-hmm. being chewed by a group of orcas on one side and sharks on the other. So. And then you've got your Titan, which is the Bitcoin thing, which is going to say, well, stuff all of this. Now, I'm not so sure that governments are going to be able to play this game of inflating, because inflation has always been tied to war. Going back in times, governments have never liked being attached to gold-backed currencies and stuff like that. They've always wanted to break away, be able to inflate the money, make their weapons, and then go to war and take resources and whatnot. We're getting way off the topic of.
We'll come back to it.
We will. We'll circle around to it.
Yeah. So just to think about cryptocurrencies, there is an efficiency to having basically digital currency. So you don't need paper. You don't need metals. Those get lost, or it's hard to move them around. So it's so much easier to pay for something just by like scanning something than taking out money that takes time. So the great benefit of the currencies, even for governments, is the efficiency, smoother, lower transaction costs. You can improve the economy a lot just by reducing transaction costs. So like a fraction of percent, might be all you get, but that's a lot for like a $1 trillion economy. So I think that's a benefit. That's why governments are moving toward it too. Not so much to have a separate currency, but to make the existing currency more efficient.
Yeah. The thing is that they're going to do the same game. Like the US dollar was worth like $1 70 years ago. Now it's worth 4 cents.
But in general, that actually is a sign of a healthy economy. So
what?
When your currency...
No, seriously, if I've got saving of today, and how am I going to save for my retirement?
Well, this is where, yes, your money is worth less, but from a country point of view, it's not about the particular dollar that matters. It's about your overall economy. So like maybe that dollar is worth less, but you should be taking a dollar and making more dollars with it.
As a 70-year-old, 75-year-old?
Yes. This is we have like stocks, we have bonds, we have mechanism or even bank accounts, right? So the idea is that it's not so important like what each dollar is worth. What matters is your total wealth.
Okay.
And so the idea is you take the money and you invest it somewhere, and it brings you back more money. Right. So what you want is you want to have your rate of return or return on investment to be larger than inflation rate. Inflation rate is going to bring down your money, but your rate of return should be higher than that. So overall, you're not so concerned about inflation if you're making a lot more money. So I think that's like in the old world where people just kept their money in the bank and made a little bit of money. That model, your interest rate has to be higher than the inflation rate. But
Yeah.
that's a big idea. It's not so much the inflation rate. You have to look at the overall economy.
Yeah, even when I was young, you could put money in a bank account and you can get like, positive percent on return. Now it's all 0%.
Yes.
So it's like, like that doesn't sound very good to me.
Which is why people are moving into stocks and bonds, balanced portfolios.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's definitely be riskier, right?
Yeah,
You're taking
hell of a
risk.
lot riskier, because that means
Yes.
now you have to research the hell out of all these different companies and whatnot. Bonds, I suppose in the past wasn't so good, but not now since the virus has hit, it's gone up massively.
Yes.
Yeah, you wouldn't have thought it would be a good place to put your money, but now it is.
Well, right now the problem is that governments are forcing individuals to make these decisions. Like in the past,
Yeah.
companies, you had pensions.
Yeah.
So companies, they had their finance experts decide where to invest and maximize returns,
Yeah.
and send money going to pensions. Or governments, they have pay-as-you-go. So the government grows, they're taxing people.
Yeah.
So individuals didn't have to make these hard decisions.
Yeah.
When you force individuals to make decisions, then you're like, wait, I don't have a PhD in finance. What am I going to buy? That's really hard. So I think this is like one of those things where the stock markets, those financial companies are making a lot of money off individual decisions.
Oh.
But it's not a good policy for government to make.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
the people have different interests.
Yeah. So what about artificial intelligence? What area are you in the artificial intelligence?
So I'm actually quite old. So I learned it like around like 25 years ago. So
okay.
So my artificial intelligence is actually like the old-fashioned
The
artificial
old school, like Lisp? Like
Yes,
that
yes.
Oh, really?
That's how old I am, yes.
You don't look it. You certainly don't
Thank you,
look
thank
it.
you, thank you.
Maybe that's why you said no to the gin and tonic, right? All right, you're from the Lisp generation, so the
Yes.
forgotten decade. The forgotten decade where you were like, God damn this. God damn, it's not working. And now the systems have sort of like come of age.
Yeah, so so my artificial intelligence is expert systems. So I take like my expertise, so I'm also expert in statistics. I take everything I know about statistics and I put it into a computer program.
Yeah.
And the computer program pretty much does exactly what I do and doesn't make mistakes. So it's like a better version of myself.
Yeah.
That's the old expert systems.
Yeah.
The new artificial intelligence is machine learning, where the machine like tries to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
You give it data, you give it like good, these are good results, these are bad results, and tries to figure out like how to do this in the future. And so the good thing about expert systems is you know how it works. Like I basically specify exactly what decision should be made. But it doesn't do new things. Machine learning is the opposite. You have no idea how it works. Like random stuff seems to happen, but it can learn new things. And so right now it's relatively primitive. It can like figure out cats and dogs, that sort of thing. It's starting to do more sophisticated things, but it's always a big problem of like if you create the system and you don't know how it works, you actually don't know how effective it is, right? If you can tell the outcome, that's good. But like if you, like in the United States, they're using it for sentencing convicted criminals, which is very dangerous because like you're not sure how it works. The people who programmed it, they might have biases, or data you might put into it has biases. Certainly a lot of racial bias in sentencing.
Yeah.
And now you're reproducing that same racial bias.
Oh, right.
So that's a big danger right now of artificial intelligence. You're not sure how it works. You're not sure if it's really working well or not.
Sounds like a train smash in slow motion, that does.
Yes. And the worst thing is that people have a lot of confidence in it. Right? So like people like me, I actually know artificial intelligence, I know machine learning. I can see all the problems with it. But if you're an outsider, someone tells you artificial intelligence, like, yeah, and it costs less money.
It's the buzzword, latest buzzword.
Yeah, so it's going to cost you less money, and it's going to be efficient, and it's objective. And so people just like, oh, that's great, less money and more efficient, let's just do it. So in the United States, they've people have created artificial intelligence essay scoring systems. And so they take them score essays. No one knows how it works, not even creators know how it works.
Wow.
But it's less expensive. You don't have to hire a teacher anymore to grade essays. You feed it to your computer program.
Yeah, I've actually played with that, yeah.
It gives you like scores. You have no idea if scores are good or not. If you really check, you see like some don't make that much sense. But if people can't evaluate the system, and of course you make sure it's hidden behind patent so no one can look at how it works, then you can't evaluate it. And so there's student complaints about like, I used to get A's, how am I getting C's now, right? It's artificial intelligence. You can't argue with that. So that's a huge problem. I think the biggest problem is not, people are afraid artificial intelligence is taking over the world. like Skynet, like Terminator stuff.
Yeah.
I think the much bigger danger is that people give up authority to artificial intelligence without knowing what it actually can do. So I think right now, the artificial intelligence is actually relatively incompetent. So people think the danger is artificial intelligence is too smart. I think the much greater danger is that people don't know what it can do, and they don't realize how dumb it is.
Yeah.
And trusting it to make decisions, they're actually quite dumb. So like in the UK, you probably heard about the grading system. Like there are always massive complaints about the grades. They finally gave up on that.
No, please expand on that. Sorry, I don't know.
So during coronavirus,
Yeah.
they're supposed to take exams, and they're like, okay, instead of taking an exam, we're going to give you grades based on like past information about you.
Oh God. All right.
So you're recreating the biases that existed before. So of course, like people in poor schools or more minorities, their scores are much lower than they were before.
Right.
And so they complain. They decide like, okay, it's not working. We're not going to do that. So they're going to like use grades or something else. But this is the danger of like when you trust a computer system, often a computer system is not well designed enough, and it will make stupid decisions.
Sure. Yeah, and like the markets that are trading, this is when you start seeing like cascading sort of like market crashes because like they just make these sort of biased decisions and it just goes one way.
Yes.
And if you're in the right position, you can pick up some good prices then.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
And markets are really complicated. I mean, it's not like, I'm not saying computer scientists are stupid. They're just facing a really difficult problem.
Yeah.
Like in any situation where you have to make judgments, often you have to consider like hundreds of, issues or variables. Yeah. And then if you want to do that with a computer program, and you don't know how it works, you're just waiting for disasters to happen.
Yeah, I've tried to write a program to do these sorts of decisions, and I sort of naively pick up my editor and like, okay, let's try this.
Yes.
Not knowing it, because my thoughts are like you only know about it when you actually do it. You know, when you actually are face to face with this problem, and very very quickly. I realized the scope of this thing was it's massive.
Yes.
It's fucking massive. And I thought, okay, all right. Okay, I'd rather just use my old noggin and understand the fundamentals and make a trade every, 2 trades every 4 years kind of thing. That sort of thing. And no, I'm not going to play that. I've lost too much money doing, the fast stuff, the day trading. No way.
Yeah,
not
so
happening.
it is seductive because if you pay attention to it, you learn about it, you can probably do better than most other people. And so I actually invested in South African Rand at one point.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
When was that?
This was like way back when I was a graduate student. And I had a little bit of time.
Enamored with Mandela and...
Yes, and also like I did all this research on the currencies and business, so I thought I kind of knew stuff. And so I remember like the first day I made 10%. Went up 10%, like, wow, this is really amazing. If I make 10% every day, I won't have to work.
No.
So then the second day, it went up 5%. I'm like, that's still really good. That's 15% in 2 days. But then the following day, it went down 30%.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, oh, shoot. And then for like 2 weeks, I kept on doing this. It went up and down. I'm like, I'm going to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
I think I made like a couple of $100 at that point.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm positive.
Yeah. And
Let me get out here.
Just leave it at that.
I don't have time for this. I need to be a professor.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have a heart attack. I'm too young for this. But I'm like, you can do it. But wow, it's really, really training. Yeah. There's so much you have to pay attention to.
I think those traders are wired differently. Those quants traders, they're wired differently. They can handle. They get off on that degree of stress. Mm-hmm. And when you're into like thinking about things and consider things deeply, whoa, shit, that's very incompatible.
Yes.
I don't know anybody who can do both of them at the same time.
And I think emotionally you have to accept that, okay, I'm going to lose a lot of money sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And if you're not ready for that, you just can't do this because the amount of like ups and downs, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
But I think if you can do that, I'm willing to like lose 50% of my money tomorrow. Then then you can do it because if you only tolerate that over time, you really pay attention. You're probably paying more attention than most people. And then you could probably make money, but it's really, really stressful.
And then when you get married, suddenly it's like, you did what? Oh shit! Oh dear. So what are you teaching now? You're at which university is it again?
I'm at the Education University of Hong Kong.
Okay.
And so right now I'm teaching one course on special education around the world.
What is that?
So basically, special education is people who are, let's say, blind or deaf or autistic.
Oh, okay.
So how do we adjust our teaching to help them? Given that they have this disability, what can we do to help them work around it, or even use it? It's like for people who are autistic, often they might be even better at focusing on, let's say, mathematics.
Yeah.
So we make all these adjustments. So this is actually not my central area of expertise. I do a little bit of it, but mostly my expertise is in statistics and artificial intelligence.
Okay.
But right now, most of my time is actually spent on doing research. I have 25 grants, basically in collaborations with lots of other people. So working on large projects. So one of my projects is social reconciliation.
I don't know what that means.
So getting back to our main topic, this is my segue back to the beginning.
We did a great circle, didn't we?
So after social protests, they lasted for months. It got to the point where Carrie Lam actually declared emergency powers. So she
That's right. Yes, she
right
did.
now we're still technically under emergency law. She could declare certain laws. So like right now, by doing this is
You
this
go
is
to
illegal.
prison.
This is
You're going to get
illegal.
locked up.
Yes, this is legal wear mask.
Yeah.
So they passed a law at late December 2019. So
But didn't they also pass a law to make sure that everybody has to wear a mask
no. There's no law like that.
on the train?
No.
No law. Okay, it was just like a guys. You need to wear a mask.
Yes, because Hong Kong people are intelligent. They believe in science. They listen to doctors. So when doctors come out and say there's a coronavirus.
Wasn't that wonderful? I loved that moment. Everybody in Hong Kong glued to their televisions. My wife was translating to me like real time. Darling, what is he saying? What is he saying? I don't understand. Say what? Exactly. It was fantastic. And this guy was top. He was cream. He was cream explaining everything about how the virus worked.
Yes.
A few days later, wow, the whole of Hong Kong. Such discipline. I loved it.
Yes. So this is like one great thing about Carrie Lam. She knows that she's not an expert on medicine or coronavirus. So she hands it off to a doctor who knows what he's talking about. And then people listen to the doctor and, they say wearing masks, reduce your likelihood of getting the virus. Everyone's wearing masks, even though it's against the law, right? Hong Kong people are fine with breaking the law. You're wearing a mask, the doctor tells you it's fine. So, like people trust doctors.
Yeah.
But people don't trust the government. So we're supposed to have an election, right? That election has been postponed for a year because the government's very concerned they might lose the election because there's so much anger about the social protests, especially after they lifted the restrictions on police officers. So I think
What restrictions are these?
On shooting people. So
Okay.
I think September 30th, they lifted restrictions. So before you had very strict restrictions. You can't fire your weapon unless these 7 different things happen.
Right.
Your commander has to say it's okay. You're in fear for your life. All these different rules. All these criteria you have to pass before you can fire your weapon.
Yeah.
But then September 30th, they're like, okay, it's getting out of hand. We need to give police officers more flexibility and freedom. So we're going to trust their judgment. Of course, they trust their judgment. Next day, they shoot a student. The bullet passes within a couple of inches of his heart. Hong Kong's amazing doctors saved his life. This was a really potentially devastating moment if that police officer had killed that student. Either the bullet hit his heart or the doctors couldn't save him. He would have died. That would have been massive for everyone, right? Everyone would have been angry, massive more protests. Fortunately for everyone in Hong Kong, that bullet was a little bit off. Hong Kong doctors really good. They saved his life. He's recovering. But this is what happens when you give police officers more freedom. They're going to take it. They're going to use your judgment, and something exercise poor judgment. And so I think this is a perfect example of what happens when you reduce restrictions. So towards the later half of the protests, a lot more people were getting shot, a lot more anger. We haven't even touched on an early instance in Chim Sa Choi where they had the gangsters come out.
Oh, that's
people wearing
right.
whites.
Yeah.
So China, this is a Chinese tactic. If people are demonstrating, you keep people, beat them up, and they'll be scared and they'll run away. And that really works in China. In Hong Kong, you had these people beat them up. They're all wearing white, so they beat up people wearing black. some people are protesters, some people just happy wearing black, like the two of us.
Yeah, who get smacked.
And so, in Hong Kong, people get angry. And so, like, all these things, like, really intensify the anger on opposite sides. So the more people get hurt, both sides get more and more angry. So to the point where even when Carrie Lam declared a state of emergency and she passed the mask law, people just disobeyed it. Like, pretty much everywhere. Like, all the doctors were against it, too, because, like, people get sick. You don't want people, transferring illness. And then so people just, like, didn't follow the law. And then if you make a law that people aren't going to pass, you're basically creating criminals of everyone. And so once you break this law, it's much easier to break another law. And so, like, as a leader, you should never, ever do that. Never pass a law, most people are going to break. And so then there's this massive unrest.
I suppose it's like a broken window in reverse kind of thing.
Yes. Don't do stupid things. That's the key point.
Yeah.
Don't do stupid things that make people be angry at you and not believe you. So now, then, like, it got to a point where family members couldn't talk to each other. So younger generation typically are more pro-democracy. The older generation is more traditional, more pro-Beijing, especially people who came from mainland China.
Yeah.
And so you'd have these, like, really tense family conversations where some families just stop talking, like, because, like, anything they say,
sparked.
Yes, because it's not just an issue of, like, should we have, like, taxes of 5% or 6%? This is, like, fundamental to who we are as a people. This is my identity, right? I'm a firm believer in this way of life. This is how people should behave. And then, other people have different views. And then they're not just arguing about, like, trivial matters. They're, like, arguing about who these people are. And so if you're saying that's wrong, you're saying, like, I'm wrong. I'm not, my identity is violated. So in Hong Kong, this has been happening for years, ever since 1997. Mainland China has been trying to have Hong Kong people feel like they're part of China. And Hong Kong people have actually moved in the opposite direction. So the heavy-handed approach of China, where they try to change the curriculum, play patriotic songs, actually driven Hong Kong people away because they're accustomed to freedoms in Hong Kong. And so when that happens, they feel like, well, this is what they're protecting, this way of life, this is how to be freedoms, trust, more egalitarian relationships. If you have this hierarchy imposed on them, that's hard. And so older people, they're like, you're so lucky. I mean, like, when older people were growing up, like, didn't have enough food to eat, the economy's really bad, you should be lucky, you should be grateful that you have a wonderful apartment, a place to stay, you have enough food, you never have to worry about starving. And so there's a heavy clash between older people who's like, okay, think about survival, you should be grateful. Don't take risks of this chaos. Like, you can't imagine what it's like to have food on the table.
Yeah.
And younger people is like, no, that you're settling for something that's really basic and minimal. If you, like, give up your freedoms, you're going to be under, a regime that's much more totalitarian, you don't have much freedom or control, and you'd be really, really unhappy. So these are, like, two different views of the world, and they're clashing. And so, and in some cases, a lot of families just stop talking. And in really bad cases, like,
sleep
the parents...
in the parks.
Huh?
The kids would go sleep in the park.
Yes, so parents will throw them out of their house.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't follow our rules, you can't stay here.
Yeah.
So young kids will sleep in a park. If they're lucky, they have friends they can stay with.
Yeah.
And so it's really split apart Hong Kong. We even have separate economies. Like, until the security law, you have blue economies and yellow economies. Shops would, like, have yellow cards indicate they're yellow or blue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really dividing Hong Kong. And so the coronavirus, fortunately Hong Kong's handled very well. The other thing it's done is also, like, stop the protests, essentially.
Sure.
And so this now has created space where, okay, now here's a relatively calm, here's an opportunity to do something about it. Like, now's your time to try to reconcile.
Ah, okay. So is this an endeavor that you have sort of, like, spearheaded, or is it like a group of you guys that sort of got together and thought, this is the ideal moment to sort of do something about this? What's going on? What's happening what's this initiative?
So we're just at the very beginning. It's just an idea right now. So the Hong Kong government, they have a lot of money. And so they, hey, let's get some smart people working on this problem. So they issue a call for grant proposals. So my friend and I, we applied for a grant, Catalina Ng. And so we say, okay, we should study Hong Kong people, think about what their attitudes are towards social reconciliation, and what strategies would they favor or disfavor. So Hong Kong government's like, great, we'll give you a little money. we surveyed lots of people, 719 people.
Oh yeah.
Asked them lots of questions. We did like focus groups, did interviews, learned lots of things that's going on. So the short version is that most people, somewhere between 60 to 80%, depending how exactly you measure it.
60 and 80?
Somewhere between 60 to 80% favor social reconciliation.
Okay.
So we have different versions of questions. Like
Can we give a definition of what social reconciliation is first?
Yes, that's a good point. So right now, people have very different views. They can't even talk to each other. They can't, certainly a lot of people can't work together or cooperate some tasks. So social reconciliation is a multi-step process. It's basically having people who have very different views of the world gradually understand each other, listen to each other, understand each other, and eventually come to a point where they can at least work together in some things.
Right.
Even something as simple as let's say playing drum rope with a child, right? If they hold both ends of the rope, that would be a good sign.
Skipping rope, right?
So this is like my symbol for social reconciliation. You don't have to like each other, but you can at least work together so a little child can play with you.
Just don't kill each other and skip together or something like that, right? Okay.
Yes. So we're trying to reduce the conflict in Hong Kong society.
Yeah.
And so we survey people, and if you ask people, are you willing to socially reconcile? 80% of people say yes, we want to, but they'll put conditions on it. 60% will do without any conditions. That's why it's 60% to 80%.
Understood.
So most people want to have social reconciliation. They don't like the tension society. They want things to get better. And then so we also did analysis of different types of people. So women are much more likely to want social reconciliation than men. Married people are more likely to. So people with children, they think about the future. They want the children to grow up in a place that has less tension. And then there are massive differences. Religions are also different. Buddhists are more likely to want social reconciliation, and they're much more interested in grassroots organizations as a means to do that. Catholics favor social reconciliation but don't believe in dialogue. They're much more hierarchical because of the nature of their church, right?
Yeah.
So there are all these interesting differences. So we have really complex diagrams of what causes what.
Yeah. And
so the government's interested in that, but what they really want are recommendations. What should we do next? And so we basically have a 7-step process, roughly. So first, we have all these interesting strategies, but it's pretty clear none of them will work unless people trust each other. So you have to develop some baseline of trust. If you don't trust someone, nothing you suggest will work. People just won't believe you. And then so the first thing is the facts. What happens? People have completely different views on what happens. So the first step is to establish some record and try to get everyone to believe it. How do we get everyone to believe one record? Well, we have to have all different players. So our basic idea is we're going to have a 15-member commission appointed by the government. Let's call it the Social Reconciliation Commission. You have 5 pro-government people. You have 5 pro-democracy people. And you have 5 people who are not clearly on one side. Let's say 5 neutral people.
Fence sitters.
What's that?
Fence sitters.
Fence sitters, yes. Or they might have views, but they're not publicly open with them.
Right.
So the people we talked to had lots of recommendations. So NGOs that aren't involved politically, the Hong Kong Jockey Club, charities, leaders of these organizations that were respected, they helped the community. So those people, you find those people to be part of your neutral group. You need people from both sides because after you agree on something, you have to sell it back to their own people. So you have to have powerful leaders on both sides who are respected enough that if they say this is what happened, people believe them. If you don't have both sides agreeing on what happens, it's hard to move forward. So then it's important to empower this group of 15. You have to give them money, give them subpoena power to get testimony, documents, so that they can create a record that everyone believes. If they don't have the power to do this, people won't trust them because your record's incomplete. And then also they have to have a leader. So they have to choose a leader from within. Those 15 people, they talk, they agree on a leader, probably someone from a neutral group, right? Then you have a leader, so the leader's going to get things done. If you have just a committee, nothing will happen, right? Some leader has to take charge and move things along, but it operates by consensus as much as possible. So they talk to people.
Rough consensus.
Rough consensus. You can have different interpretations, and then you want to have a wide representation. So government officials, educators, media people, major organizations, different community representation. So it might be more than 15, but you want to have a broad representation so people feel that someone in that group, is going to carry the perspective forward. And then so you compile a record. This might take months, maybe even a year, to get enough information to have a record. And then you might have some parts where people disagree. That's okay. These are major events. Maybe 9% people agree on this. 10% we don't agree what happened. These are different perspectives. That's okay. As long as you have something most people agree on. And mostly you don't have too much contention. Once you have that, you have to disseminate it. So you definitely need a media person inside. Someone who can bring the media together. You might have TV interviews or forums, radio forums, public seminars.
I'll put them in the seat right here.
Exactly. You would definitely be a part of the process.
Oh,
right?
yeah?
And also, you probably have to have multiple mics. You need to have someone from one side, from the other side, and then you'd be moderating, facilitating that conversation, right?
Okay.
And
Sounds great.
And that's, so you want to have examples of this, and then the music's going to have to disseminate broadly. Then you also need educators, because you have to get into schools. So people have to learn about such a major event. You have to understand what happened. You have interesting activities. You might talk about critical thinking, think about different perspectives. So liberal studies already does this. So there is already a vehicle for it. We just have to take this event and put it in there. So part of the mission of liberal studies is to talk about current events and talk about different perspectives, which is exactly this, right? So there's already a great vehicle for it. You don't need to do new things. You have to insert in the curriculum. And lots of teachers are already talking about it. So it's not a very difficult thing. You just need to get some resources. The government has to support it, and have people think about it. So there's the education side. So I should have listed steps. So number one is to have the commission and have a clear record. A common record everyone agrees on. It's a clearly shared history. The second part is media dissemination. So everyone has to do it very widely. So one interesting suggestion was some of the people we interviewed suggested we should have celebrities. Which I thought, this is kind of crazy.
I don't like that.
I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, if you have a celebrity who's not obviously one side, they will get people who are not so political. And so if they're just following the commission and just talking about it, there's a whole group of people who are not political, but they will reach those people, because that singer or actress or actor.
You bring up a good point.
So I was like, that sounds crazy, but that could work. This is why it's important not just to talk to experts like us, but talk to a broad spectrum, because they have lots of interesting ideas.
I wouldn't say I'm an expert, though.
Well, I was talking about me.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm not so modest sometimes.
That's fine.
And so we did get ideas from everyone. So crowdsource is a great idea. You have to talk to lots of people. They have interesting ideas you never thought about before. They could work. It's important to explore all of them. So step 3 is education. And then step 4 is we bring to community, we have people actually talk to each other. And so
how do you handle the step 4, the education part? And would that be, you said step 4 is education.
So we have education leaders in the committee.
Okay.
And then they work with the education bureau.
Okay.
And then they work together with universities, high schools, primary schools.
Okay.
Education Bureau has lots of expertise in developing curriculum.
Yeah, right.
And then they work with local schools. So there's actually a good system there for curriculum to be brought out to schools.
Okay.
And
I see.
and most teachers are actually very active already in design curriculum. So that system is actually well set. So the media. So we're trying to do the easy parts first, relatively. Right? Okay. So have a committee, have the record. The media Hong Kong's media is great. Lots of different media sources, mostly free, and they'll lots of ways to get your news. Education is also pretty well structured. Hong Kong teachers are very well educated. All of them have degrees. Many of them have masters or even higher degrees.
Yeah.
And there are also cultures in school of revising curricula. There's education reforms pretty much every single year. There's a new education reform. So this system's all pretty well set up. So that's pretty much some of the easier stuff. Dialogue is where it starts getting much more difficult, because now we're going to have people from opposite sides come stick together. And so this is where a committee is a great example of this. So we take the media and they go on the road. They go different places. They broadcast, let's say one pro-government person, one pro-democracy person. They sit down. One of the neutral people facilitates, right? They've had these conversations probably many times.
Right.
Now they're going to recreate it for TV, radio, podcasts, social media. They're going to model how to do it.
Yeah.
And then they're going to work with NGOs. Yeah. And because NGOs also are often intermediaries. They know the community very well. Bring facilitators in and let's start with families. Families have the most incentive to get back together.
Yeah.
And so you start with them, they talk, they do them, some people do in public, they're the braver ones, some people do in private.
Yeah.
You'll have a whole scale of how public it is. And then people hear about it. Some would be successful, and they'll tell other people. And so you're going to have a whole bunch of these going on.
Yeah.
And so the more successful people, they'll keep on doing it. The people not so successful, okay, you have to do
Wither
something
away.
else.
Yeah. Now I'm starting to get an inkling of why our mutual friend might have pointed me in your direction. And I tell you why. Because when these protests were kicking off, I looked at the situation, and I'm an advocate for free speech.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's no dialogue, then people start to dig in heels, and that's when
Yes.
things start to get, you start to not speak to each other. You start talking past each other, and then suddenly you don't have a name. Suddenly I start calling you a cockroach, and you
Yes.
start calling me a dog.
Yes.
And then when the next step after that is the weapons.
Yes.
So free speech is a very important thing. It provides that buffer
Yes.
before blood is spilt.
Yes.
And I looked around and I said, where the hell are the conversations? Where are the discussions that are taking place? I thought, you know what? I'm going to set up one of these things.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of my primary reasons for doing this. So I'm actually quite thankful now that our mutual friend has made this sort of introduction, which sort of led me to the next thing, because I've been wanting to get everybody from the different sort of ends of the spectrum in that seat that you have right there, that you're sitting in right there.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it doesn't really matter. I want to hear
Yes.
every single aspect, every single side of this thing. And I want to sort of, from a critically
Yes.
go into it and say, don't you think it's a little bit too much or a little bit too less? Don't you think that, these sorts of viewpoints.
And you're bringing your viewpoints to other people who are listening to you.
That's yes, and that's the point too.
So let me, before we get off tracking, let me go through all different steps. So
oh yes, of course.
So I should have listed them earlier. So there's
Yeah.
like a record of the past.
Yeah.
There's media, education,
Yeah.
dialogue, collaborative activity, grassroots organization structure, and then transitional justice. So these are all the major steps. So you can see,
Yeah.
think big, right?
What about the
So
grassroots?
let's go through dialogue first. So it's important to go through these in order.
Yeah.
So you have the dialogue, people facilitate conversations, some will work out well, some won't. That's okay, we'll just keep on trying them. And then over time, more and more people work through it, the
Yeah.
more successful. And so initially you start families where they're really strongly incentivized to do it.
Yeah.
And you got to expand it out to friends. Anyone could come in, but you probably get these people with like these much higher degree first. And then you slowly get out like close family, relatives, friends, workmates, acquaintances.
Yeah.
Then you just like a whole spectrum of people. So this is like the first stage of like getting together. But that's not enough. Like, okay, you understand each other. You want to build on this now.
Yeah.
So how do we build on this relationship? Well, we have people work together. So if you can graduate from dialogue, you haven't killed each other.
You do team building.
Then you could start working together in collaborative activity.
Right.
So again, we work with NGOs. They have lots of ideas. They have lots of activities to help Hong Kong improve the environment, clean the air, clean the water.
Plant trees. All
Yes.
sorts of things.
Lots of great things.
Yeah.
So the NGOs have all these ideas. They need people to do it.
Yeah.
So we need activities for these people to do. So let's bring them together, right? So the NGOs will help run them. They've probably done them before. And so you have people who didn't like each other very much, but now they're going to work together and accomplish something together. There's going to be something at the end that's useful, that benefits Hong Kong, and now they have the shared experience, right? They still might have disagree on things, but they can work together. And that's the point we want to get to, where I might not like you very much, I might disagree about some things, but we can still work together and get things done to benefit both of us and also Hong Kong. So there's also an altruistic part, right? So you're sacrificing some of your time. So it's also about doing good. So it's making both sides feel better about themselves, right? So that's really important. So you have the collaboration, and then you want to institutionalize it. This is not something that's going to take like a month. It's going to take years. So the committee is supposed to be a permanent committee. You want to institutionalize these activities through grassroots organizations. So either a grassroots organization can take it over, or they might be expanding their current activities, or you might have organizations be created around these activities. And so you also want the business community involved. So they're very good with logistics, efficiency. So maybe you can even make money off of these things. Like you might sell food during these activities, right?
Yeah.
So as much as possible, you want to be self-sustaining. You want to be institutionalized. So this is why you want different people, different expertise to come together to create things. So the grassroots is about institutionalizing these activities. And then once you have this wonderful progress and movement, then you can start tackling transitional justice, right? So the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa, that was like a great inspiration. And so I thought about what made it successful. So it's basically a compromise where like the protesters wanted truth to come out, and then the government side, or the white government side, they wanted protection. And that's what they would compromise. Okay, you tell the truth, but no one goes to jail, essentially. And so for this, we also need to think of, okay, we're going to change in terms of the legal situation. Like there has to be some sort of justice. It could be like we're just going to tell the truth and that's it. Or you might pass new laws like in terms of like police reform, like different regulations, or maybe greater transparency so people know what's going on. So you probably want to have more mechanisms or systems in place where you want to change your institutions so people trust the government again, people trust the police force. Because if you just do this is all community, that's great, but you also want people to trust the government. And so that you need the transitional justice part. And so that part, you have lawyers, you have like politicians, you have this is why you need 15 people from all different walks of life. They bring different perspectives, and so they can talk about what they would recommend to the government.
Yeah.
And then if you have both sides who talks about it in that committee, you're more likely to pass it through the legislature. So you can see that like Carrie Lam, she did a little bit of this, right? She had that one forum where people asked her questions. She kind of answered a few of them. She was a little bit too defensive. She stopped having them. I think that was the worst part. Like,
I agree.
It's okay if you're defensive. It's gonna be hard. You haven't done before.
Sure.
This is not how she grew up. It's fine to make mistakes, but the biggest problem is that you stop doing them.
Yeah.
Once you stop doing, there's no hope of that working.
Yeah. And then you try to pick it up again, and then
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I know. I think there was a lot of the sentiment was like Hong Kongers weren't really supportive of that. I think mainly because of the participants in the audience. I think there might have been some people had said it was like, yeah, definitely there hand-selected people who wouldn't, pose tricky or troublesome questions. It's interesting.
But actually, that is her moment of greatest opportunity. When the way you persuade
to face tricky and troublesome.
Exactly,
I agree with you.
exactly.
I agree with you completely. I agree with you completely. And when I, as I said, seeing things like that, I was like, where are the discussions that are taking place? Oh, it's a handpicked group of people that are going to give her tame questions. I thought, no. If coming from South Africa, I know when shit goes south. I know how bad it can get. Civilization is just a very, very thin layer on human beings. It's a very, very thin layer, and that can be wiped away in the blink of an eye. And before you know it, you're killing babies, you're killing women, you're killing men on the streets. I moved here for a reason. This is the most advanced place I've been to in the world, where people are so, they're so in contact with their humanity, I can say, but yet incredibly smart and kind. And
I actually think they go together. Those fit together.
No, they definitely do. But this is why I chose to make Hong Kong my home, because it's so many great things about it. So when I saw the society sort of like sliding down, I was like, fucking hell, we need to get dialogue going here quickly. So like I've got friends in the police force, and when I noticed that I mean stuff that was going on Facebook, it was I observed these conversations and I was like, oh my God, what, just because you're a policeman and now you get treated like that? I could see that, he would say, people would say to him, it would be like, I was attracted to you in primary school, but now I don't know who you are. These kinds of things. And I remember thinking, okay, I need to get this guy in. We're gonna have like, drink some booze, some alcohol together. And my whole intention was, because the whole society was polarizing, and whenever I see polarizing and propaganda on both sides, I'm like, no. Call him in, and I want to hear his side of the story. I want to hear what's going on in his side of the story. And it's very interesting hearing when you hear a policeman talking about the situations and what's happening, the sort of the decision-making matrix that goes on in the mind of a police officer. And you can start to feel the worldview that they have and how they work. So yeah, and this is why I would see in like Cheung Kwan O, I would see some protesters that you can see this is the every group of society is going to have a section of people who are going to go out of their way. They're really ready to throw a few fists.
Mm-hmm.
They're more violent. I would actually go up to them and sort of like, sit, chill with them and sort of like, just sort of like, try to broach up a bit of a conversation and see, try to calm the situation down. Because I could see there was a group of riot policemen down there in the MTR station. I thought, this is going to kick off.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to kick off. And it's these small little things, like a small little fire that could just get, like, maybe somebody dies in that particular incident. And then before you know it, Hong Kong is on fire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then when the flames of anger start to think, and then hatred starts to come, and then before you know it, it's the society, all of the society that took so long to build, and the humanity would just be burnt away very, very quickly. And I thought, no.
So this is something as a leader. Any leader has to do at least one thing. You have to care. Yeah. And so so listening is a type of caring. When you say something, I'm listening to you, I'm sure I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I comment on it, ask you about it. So if you can do that, then you've taken a huge step. Yeah. And so going back to Carrie Lam, I thought that's all you need to do. You don't have to have fantastic answers. You could say it's a difficult problem. Yeah. As long as you listen to people, show that you understood what they said, basically respect their opinions, respect their point of view, and then if you had just done that, you don't have to have solved the problem. You can just as long as you do that, people will like you. People she cares. That's pretty much all you need to do.
She has a different opinion to me. That's okay, I understand, but she cares.
Yes.
So maybe she's not this monster that some group of people have painted her out to be.
Yes.
But she chose to let go of that opportunity.
Yes. And so if you can't do that, if people believe, if people think she doesn't care about me, then it's hard to really support her in anything she does.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to show that you care about people.
After all, she's made us all into criminals because we're wearing masks.
Yes. So in a way, it's kind of scary, but in a way, it's also optimistic, right? So if you could take that one step, if we're talking, I show I care about you, I listen to what you say, I respond to you, I take your opinion seriously, that's a really important step.
I
then,
agree.
Because I'm doing that, you're much more likely to return the favor and respect what I'm saying, listen to what I'm saying, take me seriously. Very
much so. I'm touched and honored that anybody would come in here and sit down at the other end of the table. I mean, I'm like a nobody, and such, you'd be amazed at some of the interesting people that have sat and it's just getting more and more interesting. Anyway.
Well, I think also from my side, I'm getting a lot of this too, because I'm talking to you. You're quite different from most people I met.
Oh, okay.
So, you have very different experiences, and we get to talk about things that are important to both of us.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And so I get to express my ideas more clearly, think about them through. There are a lot of connections I haven't made before that I'm making during this conversation. I get to try out my ideas to see if they make sense.
Right.
Is that really silly and idiotic, or there's a kernel of useful idea in there?
But actually, I wanted to go into critting each one of these little things.
Quitting?
Critting, constructive criticism.
Oh, critiquing.
Critiquing.
Yes.
Yeah. Critiquing. Okay, so we've got 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Wow.
No. Really. People.
I didn't realize we gone by.
Whenever I email people, I sort of mention to them. I say, it's we're gonna do 3 hours of conversation. Some people are like, 3 hours? Good God, I can't. That's so long. And I'm like, trust me, it's not enough. It's not enough. If we really get going, we really get riffing off each other, we can go for hours and hours. Hours. So it's like a dinner conversation, right?
Yes.
That it can go for so much time. How did you derive at these 7 different steps?
So I'm a professor. I do research. So we look in the literature. So South Africa was one of my great inspirations. So I looked at what they did, why it was successful, and then other places why it failed. So often it fails because one side isn't really taking it seriously. It's usually as a means for power.
So one side is not taking it seriously?
It's like a means for power.
Oh, I see.
Right. So a lot of governments, they start this way, but it's really like a head fake. They want to do something else.
So do you think somebody it needs to be spearheaded? Because I know that Desmond Tutu was instrumental in pulling off the Truth and Reconciliation commission.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times when that really got on the rails.
Yes.
And Desmond Tutu, got up on television and he was like, he was pretty powerful in sort of, getting it back on track from time to time.
Mm-hmm. So
do we have similar sort of individual?
So I think there are a lot of people on both sides, like Jasper Tang. I think, like, he's definitely pro-government,
right?
But he actually showed he cared about students. He didn't want them to get hurt. So even though he people don't really agree with him politically, but like he basically showed he cared, right? He cares about people. He doesn't want people to get hurt. Like that's someone you can have on this commission where yes, he's clearly pro-government, but like he's willing to listen and he cares about people, and then he's also important and powerful enough that he can go back to his constituents and sell them on this, like, trust me, this is a good record. They're honest people. They're trying to do the right thing, and so it's important to have those people on both sides to be able to reach agreement and also bring it back to their followers.
Okay, so going to the literature, you studied the points of success and points of failure. Where has it gone wrong?
Pretty much everywhere. So let's take Khmer Rouge.
Jesus.
Right?
Let's start over there, right? Let's start over there. This is going to open up a whole can of worms.
Right. So, okay. So Khmer Rouge war, between 1 to 3 million people were slaughtered, either in war and famine.
Yeah.
And so then, like, they tried to have reconciliation.
Yeah.
But then it became very political. It was like became power plays. And then so essentially you had committees meeting, but like basically one side just took over, became powerful, and really essentially whitewashed the whole thing.
Yeah. So I should sort of like outline why I want to pursue this line of conversation. As an engineer. Systems fail.
Yep.
The probability of failure is so more likely than success. Success is a very rare thing that requires many years of education, hard-won knowledge to be able to make a system that actually, accords with, that has to accord with the laws of thermodynamics and is able to operate.
Yep.
And in this situation, it's like, okay, let's talk about a truth and reconciliation movement here in Hong Kong. Let's go into the real details about where it's failed, so that maybe groups of people might hear this concept of truth and reconciliation movement here in Hong Kong, and there is a body of knowledge which is packaged up in a rather digestible medium in the form of a podcast, where we can sort of break apart each of these things. So the Khmer Rouge, you said one party. Why don't you talk about the actual names or get more clear?
So Hun Sen, basic.
And the motivations.
What's that?
And the motivations behind,
So he wanted to run the country, and so he basically packed it with people who support him. And so like the people are important. You have to have the right people. The idea is good, but the people really make it happen. If you don't have the right people, it won't function the way it's supposed to. So if you have all your people in place, then you can basically control it to do whatever you want, and that doesn't serve the purpose it's intended to. So it basically became a means for him to attack his opponents, and then he got himself elected. He accumulated a following, and he's still in office now.
Okay.
So I mean, in a sense, there's nothing really complicated about it. It's basically when you have bad faith, things are going to go wrong. There are other ways it can go wrong. Right, so let's take the first one. Can you get these 15 people? Can you get 15 people who are suited to this, who are powerful enough to have followers, but yet flexible enough to listen to people on opposite sides? And then do you have enough neutral people who can be honest facilitators? They might have like opinions, but as long as like they're trying to play that neutral role, you need to have all these different pieces work together. And then you also need cooperation from the outside. They need to get testimony. If they subpoena people, like, let's say they subpoena a police captain. Is that police captain going to testify? Right. This is why the government-appointed committee has to give them enough power to get testimony for different people. And you have to have a broad spectrum of people share their points of view and then synthesize it together. And then you make it digestible so people understand it. Then you have to bring it out to your own communities and share with them and get people to believe. So, having just that is already a major accomplishment. To have people have a roughly shared history is already hard. Right now, people don't believe each other. Right?
Yeah.
They have their view. They have their, they're completely different histories. So even if you can do that, that's already quite hard. And then like the media, the media can also make it go crazy.
The media are the very special.
They can go crazy on this, right? They can have all sorts of interesting stories. So like when they come out, like it's important that the media are responsible. I think Hong Kong media is relatively responsible. They're trying hard to do things that are useful.
Let's do a small tangent on that. The other reason why we do 3 hours of conversation is because I feel the current form of media is just not appropriate. You can't get deep concepts across in a news clip, maybe 30 seconds. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. So this is why 3 hours of conversation you can really thrash out a topic. So I don't know if media is the right way to go.
Well, I think if you think about one time, then you can't do it. Like tweet, that's way too short.
Sure.
But we have to think about this over long. This is why I'm talking not days or months, but years. So over time, it's not going to be like the media can do it once.
Yeah.
These stories are going to come up again and again. So we're not going to have like one meeting where the committee meets. We're going to have like different members do over time talk about different issues.
Understood.
Right?
Understood.
And so even if each time is relatively short, even if each time is only a few minutes, people will be listening to the same channel for days, weeks, months, years. So they might one story might not do it, but over time, they'll come back to these themes over and over again. And if they're done well, like you're going to have different people talk about the same topic.
Yeah.
So maybe even 3 hours is kind of short. But but we have if you think about people listen to you, let's say every week for a while.
Yeah.
Over time, they hear different points of view. They think about how they fit together, and so that's why we have to have enough time. We can't rely on the short tweet, the short interview. We have to think about long-term, multiple interviews, multiple people, different perspectives. It's like the long story.
Yeah.
So if you think about it that way, even the tweets are useful. Like people are tweeting each other. If they do it every day, they listen to each other. Over time, they hear different opinions. So Twitter itself, if you look at one message, it's horrible. But if you look at a stream of messages over a year, it's actually not bad.
Yeah. So I want to raise up 2 points. The first one is there was a documentary that was done on remember you were talking about those white T-shirts, the gangs, how they attacked a group of protesters that came back from, was it Yunnan?
Well,
where was it?
It was, I think it was Yunnan, yes.
And that,
but
the producer...
They were just attacking people wearing black.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't like they were protesting.
Yeah. And so sticks were taken to people wearing black. And the producer of... And a documentary was made. I think it was about an hour long.
Yes.
And I thought that was very good. It's a good... Yes, it's one perspective on the take on what happened. But if producers are going to be arrested, this is going to inhibit your wish for disseminating information into the groups of people.
Yes.
And now we've got a situation of I'm not saying the Hong Kong government is a Khmer Rouge, but that group, what's that? Hun Sen. You're going to have a similar sort of situation where it's lipstick on a pig. And there's no amount of polishing that turd.
Yes.
So like the people, you're not going to have the people. You're not going to have it. So arresting producers of these things is going to be a very bad signal, and that needs to change. Do you have some sort of influence in these situations to be able to sort of say, hey, government, you've requested us to come up with this plan. We suggest that you don't do that. So
this is one of the odd ironies of my life. So I'm actually advisor to ministers in different countries.
Is that so?
But not Hong Kong.
Is that so?
Yeah. So I work with a Minister of Education in Qatar and also in Afghanistan. So I did a study for the Qatari governments, and I talked about reforms they could do. So we can talk about that later. But I think in terms of leadership, this is often something that leaders don't recognize. If you're really, really powerful, you actually don't want to use too much of your power. So a good leader, if you're an emperor, you could just force people to do things. Yeah. But that's actually not an effective type of leadership. what you want to do is create an environment where people are doing the right thing because they want to do it. They feel like it's the right thing to do. So you have a lot of power. You have information. You can control procedures, ways of doing things. So you actually want to have a soft touch. If you have a soft touch, people feel like they're doing their own thing, and you're not really bothering them that much, and they're doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
But it's not antagonistic. It's not because impose power.
Yeah.
And so the great temptation when you're too powerful is it's too easy just to impose your will.
Yeah.
You don't spend time and effort to build consensus and persuade people.
So the Chinese would refer to the word 君子.
I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
君子, a superior man. Confucius would refer to it like a superior man. Would be able to do what you're talking about, have the power, but not reduce it to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or soft power in terms of rather than hard power.
Basically, I have the sword, but I'm going to keep it sheathed.
Yes. So I have a sword, but not You still have the sword, but we're going to talk about it. Yeah. We're going to try to do things in a way that you think it's appropriate for you.
Yeah, but that's what nuclear power is really. It's like, I've got the bomb. Now let's sit at this table and discuss civilized.
Yeah. but we want to do something that's good for you and good for me.
Yeah. Indeed. The second concern I have, and this is not a poke at you.
Yeah, poke away.
It's not. No. I, as an engine. Yeah, please. Let me top this up.
Thank you. Sorry.
No. You can entertain the guests a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. Let's get some water.
But one thing I learned about ministers, they're really demanding.
One thing you learned about what?
Ministers is they're really demanding. Because they're so powerful, they expect answers like yesterday, and and they're completely demanding. Like in Qatar, they fly me over there, and I just hang out and they have a phone. They call me. As soon as they call me, I have to show up. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. I just they call me, I show up.
Can't you just tell them, wait, I'm looking at beautiful women or something?
Well, they flew me there.
Well, so what? Come on. No, I'm just kidding. I'm being facetious.
But the thing is that when you have that much power, you're accustomed to telling people what to do, and everyone's at your beck and call. So it's a very strange situation. Yeah. And so I'm a director of a research center. I'm used to being in charge of everything, right? So I try to exercise that type of leadership. I try to persuade people to doing things for their own good. And so some of my staff feel guilty. It's I feel like I'm not even working for you. I'm just working for myself. I'm like, no, that's really good. That shows we're really effective together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. What I was going to say is from when building things okay. So from an academic perspective, when you learn about these, you read the literature, you read the papers. It's in many cases it's very different from real world.
Yes. These are all real world cases.
No. Okay.
Yeah. The stuff I read are real world cases.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So each of these 7 steps, it's not sort of academics are intelligent people. They can create ideas and things that might not be practical or real.
Yeah. There's so many diplomats who've been effective. So I think a good example for Hong Kong are the troubles in Northern Ireland.
This is a great analogy.
So initially, it was a peaceful protest, right? Nothing bad happened. They were just protesting. But then police officers shot people, and it escalated, then became domestic terrorism. And it was decades.
Yep.
And then when they finally resolved it, it's still very tense over there. But they're talking to each other. They can make laws together. Even there are a lot of people. Those legislators really, I'm sure they intensely hate each other. Yeah. But they can still work together. Yeah,
you can get on a bus. And you can go through the different areas, and they've got these colors. One area's got this sort of color, and that one's that sort of color, and they have these sort of marches, or I forgot what they're called. Yes. Band. I forgot what it is, but they deliberately sort of provoke each other. They still provoke. There's that element going on there. But I also wonder how much of this is the the good old Irish, the Irish.
Well,
the Irish mentality.
In a way, you have to do that because you need to retain your supporters.
Yeah,
if you don't show that you're still favoring, these people have died for this cause, people just abandon you. So politically, you have to have marches into hostile territory. Yell at them, scream at them, try to make sure no one kills anyone. But it's a delicate balance they have to play, and it's very difficult. You can't just stop it, even after, especially after decades.
Okay. All right. Okay. So each of these things is based on And I would imagine that in different countries, have they all adopted this sort of 7-step process? Is it now become like a template essentially, or did you arrive at the...
I just wrote it down.
Okay.
Like, so every situation is different.
Right.
And so, so like in South Africa, it's mostly a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There isn't any great dialogues among people. There aren't collaborative activities among black and white people, at least not intentionally by the government.
Right.
And so different places have tried different things. And so this is my synthesis of like how it could work. And so I'm trying to provide step by step, you graduate from one to the next one. And so I'm trying to provide something, a prescription for Hong Kong that I think could work here.
Okay.
So it's really important to understand local situation. Like some things that work here won't work in the US. Something that work in Northern Ireland won't work here. So the first thing is understand the local situation. Whatever you do has to fit them. Like ultimately people have to agree to do this. If we can't find 15 people, it won't work. And so ultimately, the first step is understanding the basic situation. So Hong Kong, first and foremost, coronavirus. Right? People are not protesting. People are afraid of like infecting each other.
Do you think that's the real reason?
No, I'm saying this is an opportunity.
Oh, okay,
so,
okay.
Like this SRC can work right now because there's a pause in the violence. No one's hurting each other anymore. People are mostly at home. So when you have this pause, you can try something new. Like it's essentially a vacuum right now. Let's put something into a vacuum. Let's do something constructive.
Yeah.
Right. If nothing happens, let's say there's a vaccine, people go back to what they were doing before.
Yeah.
And so let's take the opportunity here. There's a pause. This is why truces are important during wars. Right? Truces often fail, but it's an opportunity to try something new. And even if it doesn't work then, you build a little bit of foundation. So next time you have truce, you're more likely to succeed. So it's really important to have the right situations. It's about people, it's about time. This is the right time. There's a pause, no one's hurting each other, let's take advantage of that pause.
Yeah.
So every single situation has to have pretty much its own unique solution.
Yeah.
And so if you're a diplomat, that's what you're trying to do. You have to understand everyone to devise the appropriate intermediary intervention.
Have you got a short list of these 15 characters? Or have you got anybody that you're sort of like wanting to do? Because as I mentioned before, I would really like to have a chat with a group of, both sides. I mean, I would love it if you could send people my way and just to sort of sit down and just to chat to them and hear their side of things. I would really, really love that.
So, because this is a government grant,
okay,
and we're submitting to government, so we've listed people that our survey participants recommended. Yeah. But we don't make specific recommendations ourselves because the government's very sensitive about that. They don't want us telling them who to appoint to the committee. Okay. So, but there are people listed that other people have mentioned. Yeah. And so I could certainly provide you a list of those if you want. Okay. Yeah. But we're not recommending specific because we have to be sensitive to. So who selects these people then? The government will.
The government will select these people.
Yes.
I can tell you right now, Team Yellow are not going to be happy about that.
Well, this is why it's important for them to pick yellow people onto that committee, right?
It's
important for the government to put yellow people. That's why there's 5 pro-government, 5 pro-democracy.
No, I understand that, but like we already learned the lesson from 2014 that leaders get their heads cut off.
Well, that's why government has to set up this committee in this particular way, right? So back then they were negotiating about what to do. Okay. Their job is not to figure out laws or negotiate, like battles or peace treaties. Their job is to get information, and then the whole group has to agree on the information. So in a way, the yellow people are protected. They're not going to do anything unless the blue people already agree to it, right? So in that sense, this is why the structure is important. It's also important that the government appoints it because they have to have the authority, right? I cannot propose something that the government feels independent of them. Right? I have to do something where it feels like they are in control. If I do something where they're not in control, they're not going to do it. So this is also part of understanding the situation. So I can only propose things that the government feel like they can control, that they have a hand, and it's not going to go crazy. It's not going to.
So how serious do you, I suppose I can't really ask your opinion because you're sort of representing this thing. Well, let me just ask it. How serious do you think the government is about this truth and reconciliation thing? But
Well, they
this is
give you
this
money.
is your idea. Giving money is one. Giving money is nothing.
Well,
Giving money.
it's a small step.
No, giving money can just be a lipstick on a pig, right?
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is like, first of all, they didn't give me money to create a social reconciliation commission.
Right.
They gave me money to understand the situation. So this is just my recommendation.
Yeah.
So actually, I think they just saw it last Monday. So or maybe I think they're seeing this Monday. So it's actually breaking news. So they're going to see it and they'll think about it, and yeah, it should be persuasive to them. I have no influence over government, right? I'm not involved in government.
Okay.
I own my works with other governments, other countries.
Right.
So I had to make it attractive. So it's like, oh, this would be good for us. So
I see.
So my idea is like, I present you something that's going to help you. So if you do this, you should benefit from it. So the idea is that if Carrie Lam thinks this is a good idea, she does it, how will she benefit? Well, people will be talking to, first of all, there's a record. You're building a record, okay, most people are going to agree on this record. So you build consensus around the record.
Yeah.
You have people talking to each other instead of like attacking each other.
Right.
Right? So overall, we're going to like lower temperature in argument in the Hong Kong. People will get along better. People won't be so angry, and there'll be less violent protests, hopefully. And so all of that will be good, and she'll be responsible for it, right? It's her commission, and if it feels like it's not going well, she can just close commission anytime.
Yeah.
Right. So this is something she can control entirely. If it works well, she takes credit. If it doesn't work well, it just disappears. In fact, she can appoint it and not even let anyone know it exists until it seems to be doing really well. So let's say they appoint it.
Oh, then only
3
promote
months
it as soon
later-
as it becomes successful or something like that.
3 months later, it's
Yeah.
very successful. They agree, and then they pull out, and then she's like, I appointed a committee.
Back then.
But she should just say, I just appointed now, right?
Yeah,
You just
okay,
work on
okay.
it, right?
You're right.
So it's because it's under the control, they can see if it's working well or not. So she won't be embarrassed.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So it's important to design something that it benefits the person who's going to implement it.
I think also, the Chinese way is saving face.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Face can be such an important thing. And how does one basically save Carrie Lam's face? And that would have a probably because how do you think did Carrie Lam lose face at the last time she wanted to have one of these sort of town hall meetings?
I think it's the way she responded to it.
So
like losing face is not something other people control. If I can only lose face if I let myself lose face.
yeah.
So you can make fun of me, you can insult me. I'd be like, yeah, you're entitled to your opinion.
Yeah, right.
Doesn't bother me at all. That's fine. So
Yeah.
so I can only lose face if I let myself lose face.
Yeah.
And so this is something that like not many people appreciate. So the way she reacted to it, she just said, it was very helpful. People disagree with me. It's perfectly fine for Hong Kong people to disagree with each other. Right? She said that. It showed that she's accepting of different views. Like no one hit her or anything like that. She was like physically harmed. Right? And she showed that she could be in an audience with people with different opinions. If she had just done that, even though people were protesting, she would have gone home, and then like next day there'd be news stories about they had this council, and then she would announce, okay, we're gonna do it again. Right? That would show confidence, right? I'm not afraid of people. I'm gonna do it again. People, yell at me. It's fine. People criticize me.
Okay.
I'm not harmed by that.
I hear you. So, do you think something more grassroots can be done too, almost independently of government? So the initiative still sort of holds. But
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So this is why the 7-step plan. Yeah, I recommend these particular order.
Right.
But you can also independently try out different parts of it. Right. So
I think we need to get cracking on that.
like the dialogue, you can have an NGO try it.
Yeah.
Right. Or like each of those parts, different people can do.
Yeah.
I think it would work better if it's one coherent piece. But you could also take parts of it. So the government's also making decide. Like they might decide, okay, we'll try the first part. We won't empower the commission to do any of the other parts. We'll only do the first step.
Yeah.
Right. It's like we'll do the first step. If it seems like it's okay, then we can talk more. But
Okay,
we
yeah,
won't guarantee. We won't.
Yeah.
Commit.
We'll just
to
take a
anything.
little bit of a nibble.
Yeah. So then, so it's important that the plan be modular, so they could take the parts they want, and they decide, maybe the transitional justice, that's just too risky. We're not even going
Right.
to include that at all. We'll just take the first 6 steps.
Yeah.
So it's important to provide them with something where it's up to them what they do, but I'm trying to make it easy for them to do something useful.
I think this is quite noble. This is quite a noble endeavor that you're looking to achieve within the society. But I definitely do think that it needs to also be done on a grassroots level. I think.
Well, that's why the NGOs are important. The collaborative activities, the dialogues, you need them.
NGOs. My experience with NGOs are just another bureaucracy, right?
Well, there are different types of NGOs.
Okay.
Right? So some are much closer to grassroots. Some are much more institutionalized.
Okay.
Right? So we definitely want people. We want to have a whole spectrum. We want people who are connected to different parts of the community.
Yeah.
So that's why I envision this not as like the government's going to do everything. That probably would be a disaster, because you won't have buy-in from other people.
Yeah.
But if you involve different NGOs, so just the collaborative activities, you might be something that it's about like technology. It might be something about the environment. It might be about like helping people from mainland China, helping people who are disabled, helping elderly, right? So there are all sorts of different things we can do. And so if you think about these as different opportunities, that you have all these different places involved, a lot of that's going to be grassroots, because who knows it best? The people who are grassroots, people really connected to the local neighborhoods. So it could be district councilors. You want to have different people involved. And so we don't have very specific guidelines about who to pick, but the basic, the general approach is there, right? You go to communities, talk to people, see what's available, and bring their ideas in, bring them into collaborative activities. They're going to help you do this. And they'll want to do it because that's kind of their mission, right? They're already grassroots. They're trying to help their people.
Yeah.
So we're trying to have all these different people who are moving roughly in the same direction, but have them walk together as opposed to walk separately.
Yeah. You already have met these people, these disparate groups of individuals? You already have got the connections through interviewing the 700 and something people, right? Is that right?
So
was it just random sampling, statistics?
Yeah, it's mostly random sampling.
Yeah. Okay.
So we just met lots of people in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Whole spectrum. So I have a few friends who do it, but I'm not really, actually, I don't know if I mentioned before, but I've been in Hong Kong 3 years. So it's not like I know lots of people. I'm not very well connected. I know a few people, but I'm not going to be the person who's going to be implementing this for sure. Like, I'm a professor. I'm a statistician. Statisticians aren't known to be good politicians. So I'm just presenting the idea.
You don't seem very dry. I mean,
well, I'm an unusual statistician. I have a few social skills.
Yeah. I think we're in the same camp then. So you're also relying a lot on the feedback or input of your colleagues and the people around you to inform you on the nuances of the Hong Kong mindset.
Yeah, it's important to have friends, is what it comes down to.
No, but I mean, it sounds like you've got a handle on it because, I mean, well, maybe your parents sort of like gave you the good old Hong Kong upbringing, but abroad, right?
I think it's safe to say I don't have a good understanding of Hong Kong situational culture.
Okay.
So, like, this is an idea. I've thought about it. I've talked to my friends about it. So I've taken, like, the best of my colleagues and friends' input and put it in one place.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of implementation, it's really, like, it's up to the government. They have the access, they have the resources, they have expertise, they have the people, connections.
Yeah.
So I present them with, like, basically the outline of a plan. And also because, I don't want to impose on them. I don't want to be too specific.
Yeah.
So it's like I think it's the right level where they see enough of it to envision what it looks like, but then they could put in exactly what the details should be.
During your sales pitch, are you going to be talking about the success points? Oh, we still haven't sort of broken apart the other reasons for the failures of the Truth and Reconciliation in other parts of the world. Is it mainly power plays? Is it primarily power plays
I think the number one reason is power play, because there's a government at stake. Yeah. You get to run an entire country. Yeah. That's really tempting, and so it's right. And then, even within the same party, everyone's maneuvering to be a top person. So it's not only conflicts across parties. There's also conflicts within parties.
And
so I think that's probably the number one reason why it fails. And then, like, if someone feels that disagreement is going to reduce their power, they might be against it.
So I'm glad you said that. Now, if I imagine somebody in the Chinese Communist Party hearing about this thing called the Truth and Reconciliation movement in Hong Kong, and then I ask a few more questions, and I'm like, say what? What? People are going to have a choice? They might, like, choose something else other than the government that we're going to tell them to use. It sounds like it's not, and I say that because I look my own personal opinion. I look at Carrie Lam's government, and it's becoming more and more the mentality of one of Emperor Xi's ministers, essentially. I don't think. Maybe I'm being a bit too negative. Maybe I'm being, I just don't think that Carrie Lam and the current government is going to even. They might just say, okay, yeah, let's hear what you have to say. But I honestly don't think that they're going to go through with this. I'll be surprised if they do.
It's actually even worse than that.
Okay.
So my report is going to go to like a government official, not necessarily high-level government official, some government official who reads grant reports. That person has to be impressed enough to move it up the chain to someone who can actually implement it. So there are actually several steps before it gets anywhere near someone who's powerful enough to implement it. So the idea has to be powerful enough that someone thinks it's good and has to travel by itself without me.
Then it's too early to give it to the government. Then, my opinion is too early. This has to have traction on the people first. Governments will only follow. Generally, governments follow the people, right?
This is not that type of government.
Yeah.
This is why the specific situation for it. So
that's true.
It's like the details are really critical. First of all, we never say movement. That's just like a bad word. Second, we don't talk about choice. Right? This proposal does not have choice in it. Because choice is going to raise flags. So it's really important to have the idea framed properly so no one gets upset at it. You're
a canny bastard. You are a canny bastard. I'll admit that.
So in a way, I think your example is good. Your framing is good. She's kind of like a minister. Like she has to listen to Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
And so when I talk with ministers, like in Qatar, it's a similar situation, right? I can only present something to them that's going to, one, make them look good, two, make their emir or whoever else they're talking with look good too, and minimize the opposition, right? If there's some opposition, I need to anticipate it and either make it so small so it's not important or buy them off or somehow support them so that will get them on board. So as much as possible, you want everyone to agree to it, right? Yeah. If someone disagrees, there's a clear opponent and they have a strong incentive to attack it. So if someone's going to disagree, you have to give them something else in return so they feel like they benefit. So as much as possible, you want many people to benefit from it. So in economics, there's something called a Pareto improvement, which means everyone either same or improves. And that's like if you're developing policy and you're an outsider, that's what you need to do. If you're an insider, you can you have levers of government. But if you're an outsider, you have to present something that like pretty much everyone who sees it benefits.
How did you get into this to be an advisor for Afghanistan ministers and Qatar?
Qatar.
How did you said we can talk about it later, and I think I'm seeing a certain set of skills here, which seems to put you in a prime position to be able to at least eventually get this onto a table of an individual within government who could see the benefit of this. So it would be interesting to maybe hear your experience about and how you even got there in the first place.
So I wish I could tell you there's some standard strategy to do this.
Yeah.
But actually, my best understanding is that someone heard that I do good work. I seem to care about education, and I seem to be very good at statistics.
Yeah.
And I come from a good school and a good background, so I'm a professor. And so I think that's what happened. So someone heard me at a conference, heard me give a talk, and then thought oh, he seems like a person to give this to.
Yeah.
I don't actually. So people ask me all the time, how are you so connected to the Qatar government? I'm like, I'm not. I have no idea who these people are.
So what? You're cited all over Qatar, is that right? And it's oh Jesus.
So
everybody knows you. It's
no. So I it's just to give so if I can take a few minutes to tell a great story.
Yeah, plenty.
So Qatar has done really well in international comparisons.
In what? Sorry?
International test comparisons.
Okay.
So 60 countries take these tests, like English or language tests, math, science, and then they see how they do. So Qatar, in 8 years, their scores went up 20%, which is like astoundingly high. Usually,
that's amazing.
you have like 1 or 2% difference. Like very rare you have such a huge jump. And so they're like, hey, let's get experts to explain exactly why we're so fantastic.
Oh,
so
Survivor.
So Qatar has tons of money. So they just picked 3 teams, and so I'm one of those, and so they asked me to do this, and I'm fine. They send me data, I analyze it, and actually I send them my report, and it's really bad news. So I actually tell them, your schools are terrible, your students are doing badly, and so before your kids go to school, they're 20% higher than United Kingdom kids of the same age. After 6 years of schooling, Qatari kids are 20% behind United Kingdom kids. So your scores are higher, but it's not because of your schools. It's most likely because, actually, it's pretty much because now your families are richer. They discovered gas, so they exported around the world, they made a lot of money. Yeah. The economies grew. Yeah. And if you're Qatari, people they just hire you because there's so many jobs available. I think 87% of people who live in Qatar are outsiders. They have to import so much labor. So you can definitely get a job. You make money, and you buy books, computers for your kids. So in those 8 years, the home environment was really much better. So before we went to school, they learned lots of stuff. Why is it their schools are so bad? Well, the thing that stood out the most is these primary school kids don't like their teachers. Which you're like, wow, that's so odd. Every single primary school teacher I know is really friendly and warm. They love kids. And so the best I could figure out is that the kids who don't like their teachers, they think their teachers are unfair. And so that's really bad. If a child thinks the teacher's unfair, you're just not gonna like them, because that's one of the worst things you do if you're unfair to a child. And so I don't know much more beyond that, but my idea was that Qatar is a very collectivist country. So you probably heard the saying, me and my brother and my cousin against the world, me and my brother against my cousin. So it's all concentric circles. So my guess of what's happening is that teachers are favoring children who are relatives of theirs. And they think it's the right thing to do. So it's very obvious. And all the other kids hate the teacher because they're clearly favoring one child. So I think that's what's going on. So I've posed this idea, and they mostly agree with it. So they think that's probably what's going on. There's too much favoritism. So I sent this report to them. I'm expecting them just to bury it. No one wants to hear bad news. But instead, they actually invite me to give a presentation there. And so they fly me out, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of odd. Maybe they're really objective. they really believe in academia. Who knows?
Shock of shocks.
So this is also very sensitive times. A few years ago, Saudi Arabia and I think a few other countries had imposed an embargo against Qatar. Yeah. And so there's metal detectors everywhere. And then I think at that time, Saudi Arabia had arrested MBS, Mohammed bin Salam. He arrested all his relatives, put in a Ritz-Carlton. So they put me in a Ritz-Carlton, but they slept on the floor, I could sleep in the bed. But it was heavy security. They were very worried. They thought at one point Saudi Arabia might attack them. So this is the situation I was in.
Ooh. So they were in the same building at the same time as you?
Oh no, these are different hotels. They're both called Ritz-Carlton.
Oh right, okay.
But they were sleeping on the floor, I was sleeping in the bed.
Okay. No, I was also worried about bombings.
Yes, it was a serious concern.
Yeah.
So one of my friends asked me about this. I'm like, yeah, I think Saudi Arabia hadn't engaged in any wars at that time, and it seemed like a lot of talk. So I thought it was pretty safe. I talked to taxi drivers there. They said, they talk a lot, but they don't see soldiers preparing for war, and they're probably rusty anyway. They're probably more afraid of getting hurt themselves, so they didn't take it really seriously. But during the presentation, wow, Qatar is so rich. The room I was in, they had back rooms where people were translating. So everyone had these headsets. Yeah. There's I was speaking English. They had Arabic, they had Chinese, they had Russian. All these different so all these people in the back rooms doing simultaneous translation. As I'm talking, I have my PowerPoint up. There's another computer someone is transcribing my words as I'm talking.
Oh, you're kidding me.
It's-
So in the legal systems, they've
Yes.
got those chord type.
Yes, yes. So
Jesus.
you could hear it in Chinese, in Russian, and I was like, why
And
are
your
you-
slides are being translated or your spoken word.
And-
Wow.
And so the Russian ambassador is there, the Chinese ambassador there, the American ambassador is there. I'm like, there's nothing to do in Qatar. like my talk is not that important. But they were there.
Hang about. All of this was set up for your single talk?
Yeah.
Or was there a group of talk?
Well, they had other talks, other presentations too.
Okay,
But
okay.
So there are three people, right? There are three teams.
Right. Oh, okay. And each team would get to present their their research, their
Yes,
results.
yes,
I see.
yes. So I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I'm giving my talk, and then someone keeps on interrupting me. I start giving them bad news, bad results, and it's like, are you sure about? Are you sure you haven't done this? Have you done that? And I'm like, oh, this is kind of odd. And then later I realized, oh, this is the Minister of Education.
Oh, shit.
And then I was like, hey, he seems surprised.
And he's also looking very defensive, isn't he?
Yes. And I realized the person I've been communicating with is the deputy or vice minister. And so I'm like, oh, this is a power play, I think, where the vice minister is trying to make the minister look bad. Get him sacked, he'll take over his job. I'm not that good. I didn't realize this until that started happening. Okay. So my friend was worried about is it safe there? Oh, I know what she's talking about now.
No, don't worry. That guy will secure you. Just as long as you make him look bad, then he'll look after you.
But the minister is a bright guy.
Okay.
So after all his criticism, I also give suggestions, recommendations.
Yeah.
And he just accepted all of them. He's like, this is great. We're going to do that. We're going to make our schools better. Yeah. And so he neutralized the vice minister.
Interesting.
So he's still minister now.
There was a great Tai Chi play that was.
Yeah. So he's still minister. He invites me back every year.
Oh, he's made a friend of you.
He's co-opted me. So he's removed his competitor's ally.
Ah, interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. So politics is a really crazy sport.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what's going on.
How about Afghanistan? Because Afghanistan's another beast, that one, eh?
Yes. So that's just very much.
Have you flown out to Afghanistan before?
No. I'm not going to either. So I met the minister in Qatar, and so we talked a little bit. I gave a little suggestions. I'm not as much involved in Afghanistan as Qatar.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is again to do with education and so they just supply data to you, and you look at the data and you infer conclusions from this.
Yeah. So he asked me, how can he reduce terrorism among high school students?
Jesus? And you see this question and you're like, how do you take that?
I'm like, that's a hard question. That's an interesting question.
Okay.
I have no idea how to do that. But I will look into it for you.
What was your finding?
So we don't have Afghanistan data because there's a war going on.
Yeah.
So there's no data from there.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult.
So what I do is I take data from around the world, and so I develop ideas. And so I look at the literature, I look at the research, and so amazingly, there are people who've actually interviewed terrorists, talked to them and asked them why they're doing things. Amazingly brave people. I can't imagine doing that. That seems so crazy.
I would
scary.
love to do that.
Oh, okay.
I would love to do that. I would love to have a terrorist in the chair right there.
I am such a chicken-hearted person.
Really?
I would worry about dying.
Oh no! I would probably kill that terrorist if he were to try to kill me or hurt me. I would take him out. No remorse. I'm not afraid.
So now I'm a researcher. I look at literature. I read stuff. So people interview them. So I think about what are things that lead people to become terrorists?
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest things is humiliation.
Yeah.
People humiliated are much more likely to be terrorists. This is why short people are more likely to be terrorists than tall people. They're much more likely to be bullied. And then, if they're bullied for a long time, no one protects them, then they're very angry and they're willing to do really crazy things like blow up people. So I take this idea. I have data from from lots of countries, and I showed what affects bullying. And so people with low sense of belonging are people who are often bullied, and these people are vulnerable to doing things that are very against society. So I basically lay out this argument, show the data, show my results, And so I just presented to the minister, and so I think this is something you can work on. You're not going to stop terrorists directly, but you can stop them from forming. And so if your schools are places where they feel safe, where other people care about them, those people are unlikely to become terrorists.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Recently, there was a publication about people who grew up in rather violent situations, like bullying sort of situation. They tend to become more violent. Yeah. So, you as a statistician, you probably enjoy these numbers and looking at these different sort of like unique sort of situations, and it might not be work related. Governments might not sort of sponsor. What sort of hobbies or areas do you sort of look at with your statistical glasses on, and maybe sort of insights that you see? Maybe you can share it with me, like.
So this is where I'm just generally curious.
That's fine. No, this is just a hobby.
I'm explaining.
I see.
So because I'm curious, whenever people ask me about things, I'm just like, I'm willing to try any new thing.
Oh.
So like people like different foods, different places. Like there's one experience like of being blind. Like,
yeah.
So I think it's run by Orbis. So you walk around a room, you're blindfolded. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. So that's like my general approach to life.
Yeah.
So
you're very open.
Yes.
In the Big Five, you have a very open. You know the Big Five?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, but more than that, I'm actually curious. So like I actually go toward things that are different.
Yeah.
I want things that are different. I'm not just tolerant. I actually want them.
So why can't you interview a terrorist then?
Well, I'm afraid of dying. I'm at the age where I'm afraid of dying. So I think when I was younger, it might be okay. Now I'm afraid of dying. But I enjoy. I welcome new experiences. If it was like maybe through Zoom, I would definitely do that. So like that's my approach. So when people like come up with it, so when that minister like asked me about how he can reduce terrorism, my initial inclination was like, that's really hard, but I really want to think about it. I want to try it. I want to see what's going on.
Right.
And then I have statistics skills. I download data. Okay, once I have an idea, how can I translate that into evidence? Right? Ideas. Everyone has ideas, but how do we know the ideas are going to work or not?
Oh, interesting.
And this is where the evidence comes in. Okay, I'm going to test this idea, and then maybe it won't work. So I need to have a test that will give me, it won't work or it will work, and so it should be able to show like either side. So I'm open. It could be right or wrong. That's fine. I'm not invested in a particular idea. I just want to figure out something that works. So as a statistician, I've invented several statistical methods. So one of my statistical methods is how to analyze conversations. And so one thing I want to do was, I was thinking about using it to analyze ISIS recruitment. So why are people being recruited to ISIS? So I go to the FBI website, and at the time they had like 83 active cases out of 300 million people in the United States. I'm like, one, that's really few people. They're spending a crazy amount of money on very few people. And two, that's like, a sliver of a needle in a haystack. And so I'm like, yeah, that's a really hard problem. But while I was on the website, I was reading other stuff, and they also mentioned that every single day there are 750,000 people looking to have sex with children online.
Oh, Jesus.
So I'm like, one, that's a lot more people. And then
how do they know this number?
They collect data. Right?
Okay.
They work with police departments. Data? Yeah, so on the FBI website, you can download their data. The FBI is quite good. So they have tons of reports you can download. Actually, this is the great thing about being a statistician today. Like, we can just download tons and tons of data.
Do you have access to these databases, these private databases?
No, they're not private. You just type FBI.
Oh, right, okay.
And you just go there.
So really anybody, it's not that you're a statistician that you
anyone can do it, yeah.
Yeah, anybody can do it, Okay, continue.
So there are a lot of people who are trying to have sex with kids online.
Oh.
And then I'm like, I wonder if there are data sets out there. So you just like Google, like online sexual predator conversations, and like stuff pops up.
Are you kidding? Okay.
So there's a group that collects this data. And so at that time I was at Purdue in the United States. I was talking to the PR person, and she's like, I actually hook you up with this lieutenant in the police force.
Oh, yeah?
So I do that, and then they're like, okay, we have one person doing it. He's overwhelmed. He doesn't have time for you. But I know someone in Chicago. And then that person knows someone else. And eventually I'm connected to someone in San Diego who actually has data, and they have people and they have money. And so they're willing to
time.
And time. Well, money is time. So they hire people to do things, right? So as you know, like bureaucracy is crazy. So technically we had collaboration. I had to have my university president sign a memorandum of understanding with like the FBI director, and like that would take like 5 years. So we're not going to do that. So we just have this private agreement among ourselves where I promise to do this, you promise to do that, and we don't need anyone else involved. No money's going to change hands.
Let's just keep this going quickly. Let's keep it moving forward.
So he's going to spend the money. He's going to hire people on his side. I'm going to tell them what to do, and then they'll send me the data. I'll send it back. So like no money changes hands.
Practical.
Yes.
Yes.
So they got telephone, computer records of people they arrested who've been accused of either raping children or attempted to rape children.
Yeah.
And then, so I compare them to other criminals who are not accused of raping children, but we also have the records and their phones. So we take all their text messages to children and compare them. So different people are talking to each other. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is in their messages that tell there's an early detector that they're going to rape a child.
So you're doing NLP?
Natural language processing.
Yes?
Yes. Actually, technically, computational linguistics. So I use computers to analyze the text message. So I actually have no idea what this is going to be. So I spent a lot of time reading through it. I actually have a team of people. We're all working on this together. And so if you ever want to be scared, like read teenage texts with like adults online. It's so scary what they talk about, and they're so open, and they talk all sorts of crazy acts. So we would have like Urban Dictionary open, and like they'd be like words would be like, what is that? So we're like, and then most of it we realize like so much is about sex. They're talking about like pearls, but actually means something else. Anyway, so after reading all this, we quickly realized that this is a really dark side of the internet. These people probably would not be having sex with children if we didn't have the internet, because if you didn't have the internet, people would have to actually walk around, talk to children face to face. Be careful to be in a situation where other people would not be suspicious of them, and they can only target a few people at a time.
Yeah.
And you have to be really, it's very scary to do that. You might get caught at any moment. Internet is completely different. Like a child is at home, the parents are with them, they're playing the computer. You could be talking to like thousands of kids within an hour. And so then, they feel confident. Who's watching you? Right? You're texting messages. Who's really scanning? The one's observing you. So the threshold for doing this is much lower. You can reach a lot more people. You don't have to be very successful. If you hit like 1,000 kids and one responds, you're fine. Whereas in the real world, you perhaps target like 1 or 2 kids at a time. So more opportunity, less likely to be caught, less likely to be observed, and you can reach a lot more people. So this is why it's blown so much. So when I look at these conversations, I realize they're not just randomly contacting people. They're actually targeting particular people. They're looking for children who are unhappy, who don't have many friends, who don't have good relationship with their parents, so they can be isolated. And then they're very vulnerable to trusting an outsider. Exactly. So if you target these vulnerable people, you also use particular strategies. So typically, like a sexual predator will talk about how unhappy they are, some bad experience they have. And then, the child's like, oh, this person understands me.
Yeah.
And then so they talk about their bad experience, they reciprocate, they build up trust. And then when the adult says, oh, let's go meet somewhere, like for ice cream, the child's very willing to go. This is like a friend. And so this is something, because of that strategy, that's how I differentiate them from other people. So most normal adults, they don't start a conversation with a child saying, I'm really unhappy. My wife left me, right? Adults don't do that. And so this is how you distinguish sexual predators from other adults talking with children. And so I created a computer program to identify these particular strategies in the text messages. And I showed that when a sexual predator does it, the child's very likely to reciprocate. So they have similar types of messages. And then also this predicts sexual predators are different from child pornographers. People are very similar to them, or even cyber sex offenders, because they don't actually meet the child.
What is a cyber sex offender versus?
So this is where they have a child, they might mutually masturbate over Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
there's no physical contact.
There's no physical contact.
Okay.
So child pornographers and cyber sex offenders, they don't need to build trust. They don't need to try to get the child to like them.
Yeah.
Whereas contact sex offenders, they have to do that.
Yeah.
So I showed that contact sex offenders are quite different in the conversations from these other types of criminals.
Right.
Yeah. So now the FBI can take this and make use of it. So I did training with the intelligence officers. In the U.S. states, there's one person, Leo Lee from Hong Kong, was also there. I think there are 8 other countries.
Okay.
So I did a little workshop. I gave them 4 pages. Each page has a conversation. So there's 4 conversations. So I have to, 2 of them were sexual predators, 2 of them were normal conversations. Who's who? So, I figured these are experts.
So you would get the experts who would look at the data and then show to them, actually, you're not so good at being able to isolate who the sex predators are. Is that right?
Actually, it was really
Is it like a sales case for the program?
You're exactly right about this.
Yeah, right.
It's actually very depressing how bad they were. So initially, I had just people working individually. But when I walked around, no one got it. They were all deceived too easily. So then I actually changed the activity. So instead of having people do it individually, I had them work in groups of 4 or 5. And then when I did that, even then, only 20% of the groups got it right. And actually, if you just randomly pick, it'll be 25%. So it's below chance. They were worse than chance. It's worse than having a random person do it.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the problem was they have all these myths and stereotypes about how stupid these sexual predators are.
Oh, they do that.
Yeah, so they assume they talk about sex all the time. Right? Or they assume that they ask about, and so another problem is they expect them to ask about where you went to school. But that's actually a normal question. Like an adult might ask, how do you like school?
Yeah.
And so they haven't thought about how to differentiate sexual predators from normal adult conversations.
Is your code online? Is it open source and freely available, or is it?
So I actually use a combination of different things. So there's a Stanford language parsing program. So that program will break up the text into words.
Yeah.
And then I also have a customized program that will identify particular combinations of words. So first-person pronouns like I, me, my, and then also a negative emotion words. So it's a whole list of them. So when those go together, that gets marked. And then the other terms that don't have them, they don't get marked.
Okay, so you get different variations of marking, different flags of marking, and then as you go deeper in the list, suddenly you come to a certain particular combination of these things.
Yes.
Then it goes red.
Yeah, so this is published in a journal article.
Yeah,
so
okay.
You could just
What's the name of that journal article? I'm curious to know.
Is
it on your list? It's on your website, right? It should be on your website.
Yes, it should be. The journal's called Child Abuse and Neglect. And I think
Interesting.
I think it's the title's called Detecting Contact Sex Offenders.
Okay. So that's the technical term for these people, contact sex offenders.
Yes. Yeah. I'll also send you the link later.
Yeah. Any sort of feedback from this? How long have you been at this?
It's 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so very. So, I tend to have an idea, but have a team of people work with me.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So that usually I'm not the expert in that area. So in this team, we had a criminologist, a linguist, and another computer scientist.
Yeah.
And so we work together. So we usually have to combine different skills because these problems are usually too hard for any one person to do alone.
Like within being in the tech domain, it's the programmers, it's the tech people who, when they have children, they will keep them the hell away from the internet.
Yes.
Because we know
it's dangerous.
We know it's more dangerous than you think. When I see these kids walking around with phones and they're looking at the internet, I'll be like, not with my kid. No way.
Yes.
No way.
Yes.
But then I also, on another perspective, it's like I'm developing. I'm rather concerned about the direction of big tech. Big tech are going out of their way to deplatform people. If you have an opposing political view. Now, I don't necessarily agree with people like Alex Jones, etc. And there's a lot of hyperbole and noise really for me. But I don't think it's a good idea to take them off. Well, I mean, yes, you can say yes that is Google's platform, that is their platform, and that they don't want it, they can remove it. But that sort of sets a precedent where you send speech underground, and when it goes underground is when things start to bubble, things start not good things start to happen. And you want to have opinions out in the open where people can criticize you and say, oh, hey, that's a really dumbass idea. That's a really silly idea. And I'm in the process of developing this internet protocol whereby it's not a point-to-point communication. So currently we're doing data dissemination over a point-to-point communication system.
Yep.
And by doing that, it's a natural side effect to have monopolies arise, data dissemination monopolies, as is the case with big tech in Silicon Valley. Now, the idea behind this protocol, this internet protocol that I'm developing, is that it's all peer-to-peer. So data itself is atomic. It's got its signature associated with it. And it's signed. It's signed, and so you can check if there's any change in the data. And because you signed it with your private key, I can verify that with your public key that actually it is you.
Yep.
So this means that the source of trust no longer is in the host name or the domain name that you go to. For example, Amazon.com or Facebook.com to get that data. You just get the data by itself, and you're able to determine that the integrity of this data, and it's definite, and you can determine the provenance of the data too. This means that you don't need to rely on big tech to disseminate data.
Yes.
But there is a dark side to that. It's like now, and this, I don't fully understand how to sort of bring this into myself, because it's like I'm making these decisions. Do you see what I mean? Normal people wouldn't be making these decisions. When you start designing and engineering an internet protocol, suddenly new things, consequences open up to you, and they're bloody scary. They're bloody scary. But what I do see is that the direction that's going on with big tech in Silicon Valley, I don't want that too. Before you know it, we're going to have FedCoin, which is in cahoots with Google, and that thing is attached to your AdWords account. And then before you know it, you're jumping like a circus tiger through Google's AdWord list thing, just to play, to keep the Google engine working. This is what currently we don't. Google owns the internet. If they don't like you, you're gone.
It's actually worse than that.
Please elaborate.
So it's not only that they can do things that harm people, but they can do it systematically, and because there's so much artificial intelligence, they can learn to do it more efficiently. So the data is so important, because if you have the right data, you know how people behave. And then once you know how people behave, you can try things to manipulate their behavior. And then you get really good at it, because you can try your experiments all around the world, right? Everyone's searching stuff. So the more data you have, the more people are using your software or materials, the more you can try things and manipulate them. So the very simple manipulation is just making money, right? They're making more money. But you could do a lot more. You can manipulate elections. You can manipulate information. You can either reduce a riot or you can accelerate a riot. And so when you have so much information and people are relying on you, there's so much more you can do. So in the old days, there were monopolies like utilities, electric companies. And they're economies of scale. So you're always better off having one large electric company than 10 small ones, because it's just more expensive to have 10 separate grids. So what governments do is they regulate the utility. Okay, we're going to let you run your monopoly, but we're going to make sure you don't exploit people, you don't prevent other companies from starting businesses, and so we're going to make sure you follow particular rules. And we're going to give you special regulations because you have a lot of power that you can abuse, so we're going to make sure you don't abuse it. And so with tech giants like Google, Amazon, there's no regulation. And so they just grown and grown and grown. They have all this information. And so now we're in a position where companies like Google, they have all this money, they have all this expertise, and they have all this data. So essentially, they're the only ones who could really do something about it, because they have actually all that stuff and no one else does. And so, right now, it seems like the worst thing they're doing is they're actually accelerating extremism. So you probably know that with YouTube videos, they want people to click more. And the way they click more is they push them to more and more extreme videos. So if they were relatively neutral, you still have these groups forming, but they're growing much larger because they're pushing people into the extremist groups. And so that's something that you need to have government regulation. The government has to tell them, look, you should be like Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. So if there's fake news out there, you got to fix it.
But the thing is, coming from South Africa, the government over there, I've grown up in a system where I have zero faith in government. Zero. And I think this is in South Africa, we have a saying, a boer maak 'n plan. A farmer makes a plan. So basically, it's just, nobody's going to help you. The only person who's going to help you is yourself. So just get up and go and do it yourself. So I looked at this situation. I've looked at the different sort of future candidate internet protocols. I've seen they've all been like heavily sponsored by Google and Huawei.
Yep.
I thought, that's an interesting little connection over there. Why have you guys sunk so many millions of dollars into your protocol and fuck all's happened?
Yep.
Nothing's happened.
Yep.
These are, and I'm like, okay, all right. Basically, these advertising companies, they own the browsers that you use, and they're making sure that these things like peer-to-peer technology doesn't take off because was it Fagua where you get a duck
yes
just
exactly.
keep feeding. That's what's happening with us. These big tech giants are putting like pipes down into our stomach and feeding us with advertising.
And we're giving them our data.
Yes. No, we're giving them more than that. We're giving them our digital identity.
Yes. That's what data gives them.
Yeah. That's it.
But the thing is, yes, so there are always different powerful players. Yeah. And if you're a small one person, you by yourself, you can't do much about it.
Stuff that. You see that attitude? I will not. Okay.
Right. So alone, you can't do anything about it. But if you work together, you can then create change. So alone, you can't do anything. Yeah. But with other people, you can make change. Yeah. And so sometimes when there are lots of big players, you have to have the big players go against each other. Right? If you're not big enough yourself, you need to have these opposite players. Have like a balance of terror. So they're all afraid of each other, and that by doing that, you can try to get something that is actually beneficial overall.
No, I see.
Because if someone's really powerful, ultimately there's one powerful player, you're just really you're really not in control. Yeah. You just have to accept that, and you're pretty much hoping for a mistake. Right? You have to hang out, put pressure, but ultimately you're just waiting for a mistake because you don't have enough power to do things.
Yeah.
If there are multiple power players, then you need to have them be against each other. And so this is why powerful people, they work together with powerful people. They have their own little cabal, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in a position where the different powerful players need to have some sort of arrangement where they're not working together, and hopefully they're going to check on each other, which is why we have like balance of power in government, right? Checks and balances.
Supposedly.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
That's better than having one person be in charge.
That's true. You sound like a student of Sun Tzu, The Art of War.
Actually, I've never read it, but I think I would believe all his principles.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, look, when you look at the big tech in Silicon Valley, and having grown up in that part of the world, and being informed about artificial intelligence and whatnot, can you extrapolate? What do you extrapolate into the future? Which regarding the trend, where do you? What's your Black Mirror take on this?
Can the Black Mirror be white? So the worst.
Do you know why they call it Black Mirror, by the way?
Why they call it Black Mirror?
Do you know the film? The film.
I watched it. I loved it.
But do you know why they call it Black Mirror?
I don't know why it's called Black Mirror.
So the idea is like you've got a screen in front of you, and when the screen goes off, you see a black mirror. It's like the reflection of a. You're seeing yourself, and it's through the technology that's gone dark. Cool. It's the Black Mirror is amazing.
I
Some
love
of the
that
stuff
show.
in that. Oh Jesus.
Yes. So I think like the most pessimistic scenario would be they become super powerful, they become more powerful than governments, and they're uncontrollable.
I would argue they're already more powerful than governments.
Well, the governments are pushing back. So Europe is starting to move in that right direction. The U.S. government is starting to move in that direction. Biden himself actually had a fundraiser for people who want to control technology, want to control tech giants. So that might be possible, but if you don't do anything about them, they'll just have massive power, especially if Google develops a quantum computer, then they can break into any protocol. So that computer will be so fast, they could just break through any encryption, regardless of what it is. So that would be the greatest danger. You have like companies that are just super duper powerful, more powerful than any country, even combinations of countries. Which is why China is trying to do that. They're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to organize technology and people to move that direction as well. So if you don't do anything about it, that's a great danger. They just become so powerful, and they become like emperors. They can do whatever they want. That's the great danger. So the brighter future is that people organize, governments get together, they have regulations, and even something simple. They apply media laws to Facebook and Google. So like the laws that newspapers have to follow, you have to do the same thing. Like you cannot print lies. You cannot pass off lies. You have to have things that are like clearly true. You can't just sell ads that are obviously false.
Yeah, but it's the human beings that print. It's like the Uber model where they don't own any cars. You see what I mean? Or the Airbnb model where they own no property. It's like these people, Facebook owns no media production thingy. Oh,
excuse me.
Owns no media production. It's us.
That's why
who go out and print the lies and the truths and the half-truths.
Well, just like we write letters to newspapers, they decide what to print, and so so it's up to newspapers to decide what they're going to print. And so by the same token, it's much harder, of course. You have billions of people saying messages, but like you can also government can impose a responsibility onto these tech companies as well. Right?
Yeah.
We have a law. Tech companies must follow the same law as media companies. That's all you can say.
But it's more than that, because what's the largest ISP in the world with 0 customers? Google.
Oh, okay.
ISPs around the world peer with Google because
okay.
everybody gets redirections from Google.
Yes.
Google owns the internet. Everything about it. So, like, anyway, so when I see what we're up against, it's like, on one hand, technology that I might create havens, safe havens, or little places that nefarious actors like these contact sex offenders might go into. But then at the same time, it's not like troll net phishing that Google is doing, where just the seabed, everything just gets destroyed, all life gets destroyed. How does one balance this? When creating this kind of technology?
Well, this is why you need to have regulators. Like, they make big
Again,
bad decisions.
okay, so it's structured in a way that a South African who has 0 faith in governments can appreciate and understand.
Yeah, okay, so you need to have people who are going to push back. You can't have just like one side making decisions. So if they could just do whatever they want, it's too controlling. And regulators are going to make bad mistakes. They might be overwhelming, they might be too constraining, and they might like stifle entire industries. But these are tools we have. We might be able to invent other tools, but I can't think of other ones offhand. So you need to have a working democracy. You need people who are active in politics, and so people who can be engaged, who can then push agendas into the political sphere. And then they're gonna have to empower governments to do certain things. And if it's a democracy, they can also pull things back. I mean, it's really hard this because ultimately you need experts, right? You need experts who are going to be involved in regulating. Because you have people don't know what they're doing, regulating is just going to be a mess. Then the question is how do you get really smart people who can make millions of billions of dollars join the regulation industry? Well, this is actually quite optimistic. There are always people who are really rich. They have so much money they actually don't know what to do with it, and they want to do something good. So there are actually there are lots of groups of computer scientists who want to do good things, like computer scientists for social responsibility. So these are the type of people you want. They are really super duper wealthy. They have all things they want. They can't imagine anything else they would want. Now they want to do good things, and they want to use their expertise. So this is exactly the type of job these people want to do, right? They get to influence the entire government, entire world, use their expertise, and they make the world a better place.
Yeah, but finding those people is also quite difficult, I suppose.
Well, they're like people like you and me. That's why we're talking. We are that group. We're the technical group of expertise.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
true. That's true.
And I imagine like you're pretty well off. You don't feel like you need to make $1 billion more.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're both in a situation. We're well enough. We don't have to worry about food and clothing.
Yeah.
We can think about things to help the world. And we have the ability.
Yeah.
So it's up to us to help do it.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is where this internet protocol comes into it. It's just like, and it's also the other reason why I'm creating this. Another primary reason is because once I've created this new internet, I'm not going to have any content to publish on it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I could do Sci-Hub, download Sci-Hub, stick that on there, or the Pirate Bay. But then I thought, let's do my own sort of like signature thing, put my own videos on content on there. That would be quite fun.
That's why you need a team. You need to find other people to help you do some of that.
Yeah.
If you find the right person, so you talk to lots of people.
Yeah.
Maybe like none of them work out, but if you find a few people who are like on the same line as you, then you could work with them.
Yeah, no. I've got some close friends whom I'm working with. I mean, these guys are crypto engineers. These are the guys who freaking implement the primitives in programming language.
Mm-hmm.
Smart as all bloody get out,
Yes.
Oh, he's busy talking about zero knowledge cryptography, and I'm like, oh shit, man, oh my god.
No idea what that means.
No. Well, okay. It's you mean you don't know that?
I don't know what that means.
Okay.
What's zero knowledge?
Zero knowledge means basically, So for example, you take your information, your birth date, your age, etc. And maybe I run a bar, and I want to check your age. So I would pull out your card and I would put it on a scanner, and it would read the information, and it programs a question, says, "Are you above 18 years old?"
Yep.
And it would just answer yes or no. And that information is completely encrypted. And I don't get to see that information, or my code will do a check on that.
I see.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So this allows you to retain your privacy.
Yes.
And currently, and it holds very important implications for identity. Remember, we're talking about tech giants who own our identity in the form of a Google Gmail address, email address, or this OAuth, or different sorts of processes.
Yep.
Now we're going to, so zero knowledge actually enables quite some very interesting things, that in the sense that, what's my Hong Kong ID? That's an identity that's given to me by the government. Now I've looked at governments across the world, across generations, across time, and seen how irresponsible they've been with money. So and just you might be a proponent for inflation, etc. But in many cases, I'm deeply unhappy with how it's gone, and I would like to see a separation of money and government, but also identity in government.
Yes.
Damn you! Who do you think you are? That you can assign an identity to me. So this is where the libertarian side of me sort of comes out. But this technology is coming. It's here. And if people do take it up, governments are not going to, just like you said, an expert in your field, you say, what is zero knowledge? Do you think a government is going to understand what zero knowledge is?
You have to hire the right people. So like these programmers, National Science Foundation people. So fortunately, there's actually a large group of experts, professors, for instance, who are in the field. They're pretty successful. They're not concerned about making a lot more money, and they're really happy to share their expertise. So I think this is the group of people who needs to happen. So in Qatar,
I prefer the hackers, man. I have a deep distrust for authority and professors and stuff like that.
We're actually talking about the same people. I just mean expertise.
Okay, that's
right?
different.
Expertise.
Yeah.
So
real world expertise. Yeah.
So I think professors get a bad
rep.
knock because most professors do good work. They're actually in the real world.
Yeah.
They're actually doing things that actually have impact in the world. Like
Okay.
You know, the idea of like ivory tower philosophers,
Yeah.
they still exist,
Yeah.
but they're probably not the people the governments are talking to. Right? So Qatar, they're in desperate need of expertise. And so like, but you know, they have a lot of money, so they can buy their expertise. And you know, they buy 3 experts for what they want to do, right? So they kind of have this idea, like they find people who seem really good, they ask people about them, and they seem really good, and they can try them out. And then even if they're not very good, they have several of them. So they're actually competing with each other.
Yeah, but then there's a sourcing cost. You know, it's a huge sourcing cost. Like for me as an individual, oh yeah, you suggest to hire experts. These experts cost a shitload of money.
Well, this is why Qatar is in a good situation. They have a ton of money.
Well,
but you know, but also in terms of governments, I mean,
Yeah.
if you talk about poor governments, like let's say like Senegal, right? They're not very
Yeah.
rich, but most governments, you can hire like National Academy of Science people, like to do a consulting gig for like 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
It's not that expensive compared to the budget of a government. And considering like all the decisions they made that are not informed, it's probably well worth their money. And you know, and also like for governments that are poor, like I've done like almost essentially pro bono work for the Philippines.
Is that so?
So
Okay.
they need help setting up the grant system
Yeah.
because they're going to have people apply for grants. So I went over there, basically paid for my hotel. They gave me lots of good food. It always helps.
Great hospitality out there.
Yeah,
eh?
and so like I think they pay me like a few $100s, which is like way below what I would
Yeah.
normally charge. But
Yeah.
you know, it's a big thing. It's useful. You know,
Yeah.
I also get to like be in the Philippines. So I get to see the country.
Yeah.
But mostly, you can get a lot of people who are really smart for very low money if they think it's a good cause.
No, I found that like you can just if you ask in a very polite way, you've done your research. If you have a problem, you try to create a minimal reproducible problem. It looks like you're not just sort of like splurging a question at them, like help me do my homework kind of thing.
Yes.
No,
yes.
normally no, in situations like that, mailing lists which are filled with experts too, they will you'll get a nice response. I've had some really nasty problems helped by different programming language communities, and I must say it's just so touching. You spent like 3-4 days on this problem, and some dude like just emails you back and says, yeah, this is how you solve it. You're like, dude, you don't know how you just made my day. Thank you.
And also people are experts.
Yeah.
Like they enjoy using their power. Like they help someone, they're able to do something that someone else can do.
Yeah.
That's actually can be quite gratifying.
Yeah, maybe you've had a different experience from authority figures than myself.
Well, I think it helps that
Yeah.
I am the authority figure a lot of the time.
No, when you grew up, like for example, when you were younger, maybe for example, like no.
Yeah, I grew up in the United States. It's democracy.
No, I mean the people you were around. Like I've always been sort of like sort of on the edge, like looking at computer networks and look. I mean, when I set up and ran Linux, nobody I knew understood this. It was me, myself, and I who would I would install it. I would manage to get an internet connection, but it was very expensive back then, and my father would be very angry whenever I connected. And I would write a few scripts to pull information from certain websites, read all the RFCs. It was all myself, that kind of thing. So there's a whole layer of human side of things which I'm rather clueless to. I'm like how it works.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is another primary reason why I've set up this sort of thing. It's not just programming. It's not just technology. I'm actually interfacing with people.
Yes. So I think one big difference between you and me is that when I look around me, I thought like I'm not very good at computer programming.
Oh.
Like most people around me are much better at this. And I'm like, I remember like one of the first project I ever had to do in college was as a freshman was to write a editor like Word. I remember thinking like, that is insane. Like I have no idea to do that. And then like, so I talked to other people and I worked with people. And then, then I realized that actually it wasn't just me. Like actually it really is an insane assignment. That's just really stupid.
Yeah.
Like the professor who did that, he's like a child prodigy. He probably did that when he was like 20 years old. But most normal people cannot do that. So like we had a class, I think, of like 60 people. No one wrote a Word editor. It's just impossible. So we kind of had a line editor that kind of worked.
Was who was your professor? Which professor was that?
This is Columbia University. I can remember his face. I'm blocking on his name right now.
Okay, that's fine.
But he was definitely a brilliant guy. And so, and this is the problem with smart people. They can't imagine other people not being that smart. So at the end of the year, like we were all suffering, but at least I was suffering with my friends. And so I actually got an A+ in that class because our code worked to do something. Like most people's code didn't do anything.
Yeah, but that's the other thing about smart professors is they can't be bothered to do a proper analysis or checking of the work, right?
He had a teaching assistant.
Oh, I see.
He was always teaching assistant. So we got my team got an A+.
Oh.
But he let us work together in pairs. So I worked with one other person, Diana. Diana both got A+. And then they also published all the grades are public. And so people talk about it. And so there are 6 A+ in that class, and there are exactly 3 pairs of people that worked together, and all of them got A+. Everyone who worked alone, they might have gotten A, or a lot of them failed. So that's where I realized, it's not so bad not to be the brightest person in class, as long as I know who to work with. Because I think when I was working with Diana, I realized first of all, she's very bright, so that's always a big plus.
Yeah.
But the other thing is when we get into problems, we get frustrated, but we'd be there together. We'd be staring at the screen, and we'd be talking to each other, and that's really helpful. A lot of it was, I think a lot was frustration. I think if I were working alone, I'd just given up. This is crazy. I'm just going to drop the course. Yeah. Because I was working with her, we make jokes, we say crazy things about the professor, and then we make a little bit of progress. And then I think that was really my great insight that I may not be the best technical person, but if I work with other people, I also have very good collaboration skills. That's also I realized that time.
Yeah.
And so I can choose. I have good technical skills, not the best in the world, but there are a lot of people who have no technical skills. I can by collaboration, my technical skills is a really valuable combination, and that's what I use in my profession. That's why I'm successful.
I think also there's another thing is that getting into network theory and understanding stuff like Metcalfe's law, that's when you start to realize, oh wow, actually networks, the more people the more it becomes much, much more valuable.
Yes.
And so it's not just about nodes of computers that are connected together, it's the nodes of people that are connected. This is the ultimate value. So I thought, right.
This is why politics is important. You have to have networks of people.
So if I were to go into politics, I would be eaten alive. So this is why I need to do my own sort of thing like this. On the side.
So I have the same problem, but I had a different answer. So,
oh, really?
So in Qatar, I have no idea what's going on. I didn't realize how dangerous it was, right? So my answer is politics is very dangerous.
Okay.
And my answer is not that I won't do politics, but I need to work with other people who are good at politics.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Right. So
I think I should. I think you're. Yeah, I can take a little bit. I'm gonna take that little leaf out of your book there.
So this is how I can advise ministers, right? I'm not actually good at politics, but now that I've hung up other people who are good at politics, I just use their knowledge, and then when a minister asks something, I think back, oh yeah, Jackie said this, I should say that too. So I voice other people's ideas.
Yeah. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. It's way past 10 now, right?
No, it should be 17 minutes past.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's wrap this up then.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah, I actually thought we were going to talk for an hour. I thought, we're not going to talk for 3 hours. That's crazy.
No. We talk for 3 hours. All right.
I'm what are you going to say for 3 hours?
All right.